Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, and we are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee on Super Bowl Monday. Nick Frazier is in for Ian today. Hello, Nicholas.
Hello.
So I want to start on, first of all, my depression, which I don't know if you guys have the same depression I have today. But we will not have another football game for a long time until week 0 starts of the college football season with some game in, I think last year was Dublin, Ireland, some game out in Hong Kong or whatever it may end up being. That's when we'll get started again with football. And it's a long ways away, which is very sad. But I want to start, of course, by congratulating the Philadelphia Eagles on winning the Super Bowl. They deserved it. They earned it. There was no question about the game last night. It was a terribly boring Super Bowl. It was never close. I will tell you that I am happy that the Chiefs lost, and I am happy that they lost badly because I am a Tom Brady fan, as many of you know. And I think this kind of ends, at least for right now, the Brady and Mahomes debate. So I think we can put that off to the side. But it was a boring, terrible Super Bowl. And I felt like this was going to happen. I picked the game on Friday. I picked Eagles 31, Chiefs 17. And it wasn't about how I felt like the Eagles wanted the game more, though it did feel that way just being there. It felt that way. But it was more so about the defensive line and the offensive line of the Eagles versus the offensive line of the Chiefs. And that was what the game ended up becoming. But the real story for people like me and probably people like you coming from last night's game is that of hope. This time last year, personally, I was in a tough spot. Didn't know where my life was headed. Didn't know if I was going to be going backwards or going forwards. I had no idea. I didn't know where my team was headed, though I had a pretty good feeling, and I didn't think it was very good. I had sat down with Will Levis at the Super Bowl, and I remember thinking, God, all I wanted to do when I sat down and talked to him was just put my arm on his shoulder and say, son, chill out. He was wound that tight. That's why I don't really buy the Brian Callahan stuff with, you never know until you get out there on the field. I could tell sitting down at the Super Bowl, this kid had some serious anxiety. And so I knew that was going to be a problem. And I knew Rand Carthon didn't have a clue. And I also knew that the Titans were never going to be able to compete again with Mahomes and Allen and Burrow and Jackson unless they had a Mahomes and Allen, a Burrow, or a Lamar Jackson. But yesterday gave me hope. Super Bowl 59 gave me hope. And Super Bowl 59 should give you hope too. Because the Philadelphia Eagles just became the first team since Peyton Manning's last championship with the Broncos, where a team was able to win the Super Bowl without elite quarterback play. Now, many of you will say Nick Foles. And you're right. Nick Foles was not an elite quarterback, and Nick Foles is certainly not a Hall of Famer or anything like that. But for that run with that Eagle team, I can't explain it. Nick Foles was elite, like truly elite. Jalen Hurts threw for like 260 yards or whatever yesterday. He had one big bomb of a completion. Nick Foles threw for like 450 in the Super Bowl and all those touchdowns. So they got elite quarterback play in that game out of Nick Foles because you don't beat Tom Brady in that game where he throws for 500 yards unless you get the elite play out of Nick Foles. So the last time this happened was Peyton's last championship with the Broncos. But let's not kid ourselves. Philadelphia was the best team in the NFL this year. They had the best offensive line. They had the best running back. They had the number 1 defense in the league. They had 2 top flight receivers. They picked 2 good corners in the draft. And they have a fine quarterback. The Lions didn't have the defense to be able to compete with Philadelphia. The Chiefs didn't have an offensive line to be able to compete with the Eagles. And in the showdown game on the road in Baltimore, the Eagles took care of business there too. Philadelphia is, beyond the shadow of a doubt, the best team in the NFL, and nobody's arguing it. They could play that game last night 15 times. Kansas City's not going to win 10. Kansas City's probably not even going to win 5. The moral of the story after last night is that you don't have to have Tom Brady or Peyton Manning to win the Super Bowl. The idea that you can do it with a defensive first team like Brad Johnson's Buccaneers still exists today. And again, that's why last night gave me hope. Because I'll be honest, before last night, I didn't know. And I was leaning towards you could not win with an average quarterback, above average quarterback, whatever you want to call it. Jalen Hurts is average to above average. I did not think you could win the Super Bowl with that quarterback. That you, even with an elite defense, with a great running game, with receivers, with everything else, that you could not do it. And if you remember, Brad Johnson had all those things when he won the Super Bowl in Tampa Bay. An elite defense, 2 receivers in Keyshawn Johnson and Keenan McCardell, Michael Pittman, the running back, Mike Alston. That was a good team, a very, very good team. But that was a different era. Brian Billick, who won the Super Bowl with Trent Dilfer in Baltimore, was on the show last year at the Super Bowl. And he told the midday show, he said, I don't think you can win it the way we won it in Baltimore. I don't think you can win it in today's game without the elite guys. And last year, great 49er team, Brock Purdy, not an elite quarterback, couldn't get it done. But again, just because you don't have Brady, Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, it doesn't mean that you can't compete. Now, you're going to have to do everything else right, which the Eagles did from about 2021 on, including taking advantage of you. But all we're told when I went to the Super Bowl this past week was there is not an elite franchise quarterback in this draft. There is not a Caleb Williams. There is not a Jaden Daniels. There is not a Drake May. So it doesn't seem like there's a Brady, Mahomes, Burrow, or Allen in this year's draft. But I have to bet you there's a Jalen Hurts in this year's draft. Again, Jalen Hurts, mid to late second round prospect. Could you get that guy? Could, again, Sam Darnold, who had better numbers, who had more big-time throws this year than Jalen Hurts did, could he be that guy? So, Titan fans, your team, and let me be abundantly clear when I say this, your team is far from being the Eagles. Obviously, there's the A.J. Brown trade that we're all aware of, but Mike Vrabel hiring terrible coaches and Rand Carthon making even worse decisions has put the Titans back at what is really square one. But it is doable. It is doable to fix a roster. It is doable to fix a defensive line. It is doable to fix an offensive line, especially when you have an offensive line coach who is as renowned as Bill Callahan. Bill Callahan! It'll take time. And again, you got to start getting things right. You got to start taking advantage of the luck when it comes to you. When A.J. Brown's agent drives a wedge between the Titans and the receiver, you've got to take advantage of it. When Jalen Carter drops in the first round of the draft, you got to take advantage of it. But I'm telling you, it's doable. And it's doable to do it without an elite quarterback, because that's exactly what Philly did yesterday. Philly's Super Bowl win gives me hope. Again, I have no idea if Chad Brinker and Mike Borgonzi are going to be able to pull off some of the acquisitions that Howie Roseman has made. In fact, if I had to bet, I'd tend to bet against it. But I'm not wondering, can they do it? I'm just wondering if it can be done in today's era to win the Super Bowl without Mahomes, without Allen, without Burrow, without... And yesterday, the answer is yes. Because Jalen Hurts won the Super Bowl. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number if you want to weigh in. That is 615-737-1025. And coming up next, there is one thing yesterday, speaking of the quarterback and, how good are we about to go down this is Joe Flacco elite rabbit hole with Jalen Hurts? Because the answer is no. But there is something yesterday with Jalen Hurts that drove me insane last night, which I've got to get it off my chest. Again, I think it's a good thing that you can win with an average quarterback, and the Eagles did, but we'll get to that coming up next. Hey, Nashville's best deal this week is 312 Pizza Company in Germantown, and shout out to them for being one of our Radio Row sponsors. 312 Pizza Company serves the best pizza in town, as well as Chicago-style eats like Chicago dogs, Italian beef sandwiches, and more. Head to theGameNational.com/deals now to get half off a $30 gift card to 312 Pizza Company while supplies last. Also, shout out to Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical for taking great care of us and being one of our presenting sponsors at Radio Row last week. I absolutely love Hiller, and so I'm glad that the feeling is mutual. Did you know that Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical has been in business since 1990 and is family owned and operated? And Jimmy Hiller was recently named amongst the most admired CEOs because of the way he truly cares for his team and his clients. Hiller takes care of the customer on every job, every time, and they stand behind their work. And I know this because I use Hiller at my home. Hiller has 100% satisfaction. If happy you'll be or the service is free. And if a customer isn't pleased with the work performed, they'll make it right. Learn more at happyhiller.com. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, proud supporter of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. Hiller, call that fixed truck today.
Jalen, you told us this week, as Brandon Graham's trying to give you a big hug here.
Yeah! Boy, I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too.
Appreciate you. Let them know. Let them boys know, man. Tell them get off your back. Let's go.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to ask. You said after Super Bowl 57, you sat in the locker room and you thought to yourself, I'll be back. You got back, and now you're a champion. How does that feel?
You know, God is good. He's greater than all the highs and the lows. And I think, personally myself, I've just been able to use every experience and learn from it. The good, the bad, all of it, using it as fuel to pursue my own greatness. And I think I couldn't do any of these things without the guys around me. You know, we got a special group this year. We were able to learn from the past.
Jalen, you told us this week.
There you go. That was Jalen Hurts. Congratulations to Jalen Hurts on being named Super Bowl MVP. And I got to say this, with all due respect, MVP my ass. I saw that last night because I was sitting there, and I mean, I just don't have time to watch the whole Terry Bradshaw, you know, the freaking bring the owner out, bring the coach out, bring the, you know, so I put in my phone, MVP. And immediately, a tweet from Adam Schefter, Jalen Hurts has been named the MVP. And I said, you have got to be kidding me. MVP. The only reason the Eagles won the game, or I should say the biggest reason the Eagles won the game, was because their defense completely and utterly dominated Kansas City's offensive line. And Kansas City's been playing with fire all freaking year on the offensive line. They blew it with the Jawan Taylor signing, and they had a guard playing tackle. And with a defensive line like the Eagles and with a coach like Vic Fangio, they're going to make you pay. Jalen Hurts is fine. And he made a great throw to Devontae Smith on that long touchdown that was really, truly the dagger. But that made it 34-0. Like, Jalen Hurts, before he was asked to do anything important, already had like a 27-point cushion. The Chiefs had 23. I looked at the game book this morning. The Chiefs had 23 net yards at halftime. 23 yards at halftime. Like Tajay Spears, who I don't even like. Tajay Spears can get you 23 yards and a half. The MVP of the game was the defense. And because of that, I thought a defensive player should have won the award. And for me, there were two choices. There was Josh Sweat, who had 2.5 sacks and was a beast early in the game. And he pushed the tackle into Mahomes, who threw the second interception to Bond that essentially ended the game. Or Cooper DeJean, who had a pick six. Because it was 10-0 when Mahomes threw that pick six. And now all of a sudden it's 17-0. You know the Chiefs are in trouble. At 10-0. My parents had I was over at my parents' house watching the game, and my uncle's wife, who's from Korea, said, hey, Chiefs, they'll get it going in the second half. And at that point in time, I thought there was a pretty good chance she might be right. But at 17-0, now all of a sudden blood's in the water when Cooper DeJean had that pick six. Jalen Hurts threw a terrible interception early in the game when it was still in the balance. But my guess is, and I didn't vote on the MVP award, my guess is the voters were torn on which defensive player to give the award to. Do you give it to Sweat? Do you give it to Jalen Carter, who was a freaking beast? Do you give it to the Williams kid I'd never heard of that had 2 sacks? Do you give it to Cooper, who had a pick six but didn't do anything else? Do you give it to them? Or do you just give it to the quarterback, which is usually the default, is, well, let's just give it to the quarterback. In fact, when the quarterback doesn't win the award, it's usually because either somebody has an incredibly dominant performance, although even Aaron Donald didn't win MVP. Somebody has a just dominant performance that just cannot be overlooked, or because that team's quarterback has already won like 3 Super Bowl MVPs, Brady. So we're going to give it this year to Deion Branch. Like if you go back to the Patriots' 6 Super Bowls, Brady has 4 MVPs. The other 2 belong to Deion Branch, the third of the first 3, and Julian Edelman, the third of the second 3. So when there's not an obvious one, they just give it to quarterback. Joe Flacco, Super Bowl MVP. That's what they do. And that's what this was. But by this metric, Brad Johnson would have won the Super Bowl MVP in 2002. I believe it was a safety. Dexter Smith, I think might have been the name, Frazier, who won the MVP. He had a pick 6 in that Buccaneers-Raiders Super Bowl.
I'll have to check.
I think he might have been the Super Bowl MVP. But again, I'm not here to crap on Jalen Hurts. But this felt like a default. We're torn by a couple of different players, so let's just give the MVP award to the quarterback. I mean, you guys know I love Brady. And, Brady's got 5 MVPs in the Super Bowl because he also got the one in Tampa. And the one in Tampa, Brady got the MVP, and Brady had a good game. But Brady got the MVP of that Super Bowl because they were probably torn between Shaq Barrett and Vita Vea and JPP and those guys on the defensive line and Ndamukong Suh that had such a good game. So no disrespect to Jalen Hurts because that's what this is going to be. This is going to be a whole offseason of Jared hates Jalen Hurts, which isn't true. I think Jalen Hurts is a mid-level quarterback, just like I think Trevor Lawrence is a mid-level quarterback. Dak Prescott is a mid-level quarterback. He's certainly not in the top 8 quarterbacks, in my opinion, in the NFL. And that's a good thing because it means you can actually build your football team and try to win and not just, Lord, we don't have a quarterback, so let's just give up. But MVP? No. The defense was the MVP of that game. If you gave it to Josh Sweat, it would have made sense. He was dominant from the very beginning. If you gave it to Cooper DeJean, it would have made sense. He had a pick 6 and a 10-0 game. Again, the Chiefs had 23 net yards at halftime. What did Jalen Hurts do that held the Chiefs to 20? The Chiefs to 23 net yards at halftime. That's like everybody last night talking about A.J. Brown being like, we traded away A.J. Brown. It's like A.J. Brown had 34 yards receiving yesterday. Now, look, again, trading away A.J. Brown was a bad idea. And A.J. Brown's a great player. But it's not like A.J. Brown single-handedly won the Super Bowl for the Eagles. A.J. was a piece of the puzzle. At 34 receiving yards yesterday. He should have been MVP of the game. But again, I just thought the Jalen Hurts thing, I thought this was just a total media cop-out where, again, we're not exactly sure which defensive player to give it to, so let's just give it to the quarterback, which they do often, so that's nothing crazy. But I think it underscores how important the defense was yesterday. And I know the coach can't win the award, but Vic Fangio, the defensive coordinator of the Eagles, that freaking guy, if I could give the award to the coach, and maybe we should allow this because we scrutinize these guys so much. We got cameras now in the box that have their faces right there every time there's a big play, and they show the coach up there in the box, and he's got to put the pad over his mouth to say what the play is because he doesn't want TV picking it up. So maybe we should, because if we could give it to Vic Fangio, would have by far been the guy who deserved the MVP award last night, not Jalen Hurts. Again, Jalen is a passenger. He is not a driver. He has never been a driver. He will never be a driver. He wasn't a driver at Alabama, and they got to the national championship game twice. When Saban needed a little more horsepower, he didn't hesitate to take Jalen Hurts out. Again, with this, 23 net yards at halftime. 23 net yards. We'll get to your phones next. 615-737-1025. Your reaction to the Super Bowl last night. Again, it gives me hope that the Titans could build a team without an elite quarterback and still win. And 2, this Jalen Hurts MVP thing is ridiculous. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 through the game.
Now the Eagles get it back. We're going to run some clock, or maybe throw the dagger. Hurts going deep for it all. Devontae Smith! He has got it! Touchdown! Wow! Forget run the clock. That's the dagger.
Unbelievable. The play action fake. And Hurts just drops an absolute dime to Devontae Smith. Everyone thinks Saquon's getting the ball. Hurts again has all the time in the world, and he makes the throw of his life on Jalen Watson. Smith beats him. One of the unselfish receivers in the NFL with maybe what could be the dagger today for this Eagles offense and this Chiefs defense.
There you go. Now, let me say this. As somebody who, again, has been saying, like with Jalen Hurts, he's a passenger, not a driver. That throw, I was sitting there watching that bomb in the end zone. That looked like the throw Josh Allen made to Mac Hollins in the AFC title game. That looked like the throw at the end of the game that Mahomes made to Xavier Worthy. I mean, that was a big boy throw. Like, I saw that throw, and I said, good God, that one was a doozy. But it was 27-0. Like, I mean, come on. MVP. Somebody said, I did not think Jared would be hating on Jalen Hurts today. I'm not hating on Jalen Hurts to say the defense won the Eagles the Super Bowl, and somebody from the defense should have been the MVP. 615-737-1025, and our phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Dylan is going to start us off today. Thank you for calling. Thank you for waiting. Dylan, you go ahead.
Hey, Jared. Yeah, I listened to your opening monologue. I like it, but here's the thing. Let me pose a question to you. Do you think Ryan Tannehill could have won that game last night?
You want my honest answer?
Yeah.
Yes.
You really think so?
Yes. The question I have for everybody
here's the thing. Okay.
Is would Will Levis have won that game last night?
Oh, hell no. But, okay, so Ryan Tannehill threw like 3 picks versus the Bengals. And when the Titans in that divisional game, and you think he could have won that game? The quarterback matters, Jared. I mean, it matters. And
so here's what I'm going to tell you, Dylan.
Okay. All right.
I've seen, because there's a lot of people, thank you for your call, Dylan. There are a lot of people that are saying, you know, again, I think that is I understand, you know, like the whole, like, Tannehill would have won that game. I'm hearing a lot of people on TV saying, this is the worst I have ever seen Patrick Mahomes play. And there might be some of that. Because what is the one thing when it comes, Nick, I'm going to put you on the spot here. When it comes to people around the country and games the Titans play, what is the one thing that always seems to be obvious?
The defense.
They don't watch. They don't watch.
Well, they don't, but I'm just saying the defense is always the defining factor when everybody goes against the Titans.
I saw a game 3 years ago when Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown beat the ever-living crap out of Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. And they did it because Jeffrey Simmons, Danico Autry, Harold Landry, and Bud Dupree had a day. Like, they had a day. And I want to say the final score of that game was 27-3. And, I mean, they beat the crap out of Kansas City. And Kansas City, the biggest problem was they were trying to kind of fix their offensive line on the fly, kind of like last night. And the Titans had invested a lot of money on the defensive line. Those 2 high picks in Landry and Simmons, and then the money on Autry and Bud. And Bud Dupree was finally healthy. And I remember the first drive of the game, it was a 3rd down. And Bud Dupree came and strip-sacked Mahomes from the blind side. And I tweeted out right then and there. It was just an excruciatingly hot day in October. And I tweeted out, I said, if Bud Dupree is going to strip-sack the quarterback from the blind side on 3rd and long, we're going to have a totally different conversation about the Titans. And I remember that day. And I remember there was a play where I was sitting in my seats and I'm watching Tyreek Hill. And Greg Maben started at corner that day for the Titans. And there was a play where Tyreek Hill was running wide open down the field. And so I am waiting for, I see Tyreek running wide open, and I'm like, okay, there's a touchdown. And instead, I turned my head thinking I'm waiting for Mahomes to deliver the ball to this wide open Tyreek Hill. And I turned my head, and Mahomes is in the backfield trying to avoid pass rushers like Allen Iverson with a crossover dribble, trying to like juke a guy out in the backfield. He couldn't see down the field. You can have Greg Maben cover Tyreek Hill if you get to the quarterback. And so what's crazy is, again, you asked the question, could Tannehill have won that game? Yes, I've seen Tannehill win that game. And guess what? Not that we had regular season weekly MVPs. We'll have to go back and look up that show log from that day, but I don't think I gave Tannehill a game ball that day. Maybe I did. I don't know. But again, I saw Tannehill win that game. The defensive line got after Mahomes. He was frustrated. There was nothing they could do. They turned the ball over. David Long had a big interception. A.J. Brown had a touchdown. I've seen that game with Tannehill at quarterback. Adam in Portland is up next here on the program. Thank you for calling and waiting. Adam, go ahead.
I really want to have Bill Carter after that game. Like, that's what it told me. Like, if these guys aren't elite quarterbacks, then obviously having an elite quarterback is not the entire answer to the story. Also, you know, just because I don't think you're quite crapping on Jalen Hurts, but also he didn't do nothing yesterday. Every decision he made was good. I would take him over the Titans quarterbacks of the last 6 or 7 years with the quarterback play he gave you yesterday. It wasn't special, but the runs he made I thought were very good. The decisions he made, he dumped down. Like, I thought he did a lot of really good, solid quarterback plays. Is it MVP worthy? No, I don't think so.
What about the red zone interception early in the game when it was still in the balance?
Yeah, it was gorgeous. And it would have been cool to get that dude on his birthday at 22 years old, a Super Bowl MVP. Like, that would be incredible. Like, what a life this guy's had anyway. But, no, dude, like, that only thing I learned from that Super Bowl, which overall it was a terrible Super Bowl. The only thing I learned from it was, number one, the commercials are not worth $8 million anymore, and that you don't have to have an elite quarterback if you've got an elite defense and an elite pass rush. So give me Bill Carter.
Well, the other thing we have to remember, thank you for your call, Adam. The other thing we have to remember is the Eagles have the best offensive line in the NFL. So, I mean, the Eagles, it's a very well-built team, built off of taking advantage of dumber teams like the Colts, the Saints, the Dolphins, the Titans. You know, that's what they've done. And so they're great across the board. Best offensive line in the league, 2 great receivers, a good tight end, the best running back, the best defense, the best defensive coordinator maybe. I mean, they have, you know, I said to somebody yesterday, if you switch the quarterbacks and you put Mahomes on the Eagles, the final score will be 2,000-0. And again, to Adam's point saying, you know, hey, I would take Hurts over the quarterback play of the Titans the last 6 years. Well, I certainly assume that you would take it over Mariota, Jake Locker, and Vince Young. So it's really more like the last 20 years, but that's not really saying much. The Titans haven't really had. Again, I'm not saying that Tannehill is better than Hurts. I'm saying Tannehill could have won the game yesterday. That's the same stuff Tannehill did that allowed you to get past Tom Brady and Lamar Jackson because you played great defense. You got big turnovers. You know, the interception that Byard had of Lamar Jackson, the 4th down stops that you had in those games. I mean, those were big-time plays. So I'm not knocking I'm not poo-pooing Hurts. I'm just saying, like, hey, this is great. Like, he managed the game, and he managed it very well, which is the job of a game manager. But, again, let's not – well, it's better than what the Titans have had. Well, no, duh. Let's go to TC. Who's up next here on our program? TC, thank you for calling and waiting. Go ahead.
Hey, how you doing, Jerry? I just want to agree with you because I was looking at the game and he played okay. Like he played decent. He played, you know, a really good quarterback, but I don't consider him elite. He had the best of everything, like you said. And the question is going forward is he 23, 24 Hurts, or is he 24, 25 Hurts? Because I don't think he's consistent enough, because you've been looking at his career now, got a good sample size where he did okay, did horrible, did well in the Super Bowl the first time, then did horrible again. Now he's done well. So really, is he consistent enough to even be considered even like borderline elite? So I don't know. I just want to hear your opinion on that. Talk to you later.
Yeah, thank you for your call. I think the answer to that is no, but it's not really going to matter if the Eagles keep drafting great players and keep taking advantage of all these stupid teams every year. Like, if the Eagles keep drafting Jalen Carter and Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean and if Lane Johnson retires and they draft a 3rd-round tackle like PT and Jeff Stoutland coaches him up into being Trent Williams, then it may not ever matter. But like, no, Hurts is not, he's not an elite quarterback. To me, there are 7 guys who are in the discussion right now in the NFL to be an elite quarterback. And it is Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Jackson, Daniels, Herbert, and Stroud. And I can hear the arguments for or against Herbert and Stroud. But to me, that's it. And I cannot, in good faith, in good conscience, even think about putting Jalen Hurts in that category. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. I got to get something off my chest from last night's game. I got to do it. I got to get it off my chest. We'll do it next. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game. Stillman and Company, we are live here on the program. Boy, it is good to be back from New Orleans. But I just got to get this off my take. This take off my chest. The Super Bowl halftime show last night. Horrible. And I am a very harsh critic when it comes to the Super Bowl halftime show. I expect the Super Bowl halftime show to be good. Beyonce's Super Bowl halftime show, good. Snoop, Eminem, Dr. Dre in Vegas, good. Justin Timberlake in Minneapolis, good. The Weeknd, this, I'm not going to say it was the worst Super Bowl halftime show of all time because I'm thinking off the top of my head like which ones were worse or whatever. But, I mean, look, the only Super Bowl I've ever been to, Phil Collins was the halftime act. So, it's doable to have a worse halftime. This halftime show last night was horrible. It was horrible. I was at a party last night, and not one person there was like, yes, this is a great halftime show. You know, usually the reaction to the halftime show is some people say, oh, this is really, really good. And some people say, eh. Every now and then there's the Eminem, Snoop Dogg, Dre, and everyone in the world's like, that was an incredible halftime show. Beyonce. Even Usher last year. I thought Usher was good last year. Not the end of the world. I thought Usher was a big enough star to have the halftime show. I thought Usher performed well enough for the halftime. It was fine. But the just amount of people that know better, that are making this into this whole, like, you don't understand Kendrick Lamar. You people and the NFL have to learn that it's not about who you want. It's not about who you want people to watch. It's about who the people want. A lot of people don't even know Kendrick Lamar like that. And I was sitting there today talking to my girlfriend about it. She's a music executive. And I said, would Kendrick Lamar sell out a stadium? If Kendrick Lamar were to play Nissan Stadium, would he sell it out? And I think the answer is no. Because Luke Combs can sell out Nissan Stadium in back-to-back nights. Eminem and Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, the old Up in Smoke tour, if they were to play Nissan Stadium, they would sell it out. So to the you don't get it crowd, when it comes to Kendrick Lamar, guys, it's the Super Bowl halftime show. The point of it is that everybody is supposed to get it. What am I supposed to get? Hey, this Kendrick Lamar, he's a rapper, he's new to the scene, and I know he's not new to the scene because he's been there for a while, but it's like this Kendrick Lamar, he's this, he's that, he's good. Then put him on at halftime of the Detroit Lions game on Thanksgiving. That's probably where he belongs. And, with another hit or two, maybe the Cowboys game. But the Super Bowl? Give me a break. He is not mainstream enough, doesn't have enough hits, and quite frankly, isn't good enough to be the Super Bowl halftime show. And you can't say, because I'm sure there'll be some people out there that, oh, Jared, he's just anti-rap. He just isn't with the times. He just isn't. But that can't be true because I didn't have a problem with Dre, Eminem, and Snoop, and everybody loved it. Even Rihanna 2 years ago. I was actually thinking about this because I remember I was in Phoenix for the Super Bowl, and I was like, who did the halftime show? I was like, oh, yeah, Rihanna. That was fine, I guess. I don't remember anything of it with Rihanna one way or another, which means it was probably fine. And so I understand that it's hard to pick a halftime act. I get it. Because, again, it has to be a big enough star that everybody knows and everybody wants to see. And then it has to be somebody that wants to do it. I mean, Taylor Swift would be an obvious pick for the Super Bowl halftime show, but she's currently dating the tight end, so it probably doesn't make a lot of sense. So there's not a ton of people out there as easy because all the people that would be great have already done it. Beyonce's already done it. Justin Timberlake's already done it. Again, all the good ones, they've already done it. Now, I saw Skip Bayless was mad that Lil Wayne's from New Orleans and they didn't ask him to do it. I don't know if Lil Wayne is good enough for that. And I like Lil Wayne. And so the old bands are out. And there have been a lot of people that have already played that are big enough stars that if they were to do it, and then there are some up and coming stars that if you gave the suit, like I love Jelly Roll, but if you gave the suit, like, is Jelly Roll ready for the Super Bowl halftime show? Probably not. Like, he's probably not there yet. It's got to be kind of more popish. But what you can't have is you can't have a Super Bowl halftime show where most people don't know who the performer is, where most people don't know the songs. And then, again, where there's all this stuff going on and there's, Drake got dissed last night. I don't even know what this whole Drake diss Kendrick, I don't even know what that's about, and I don't care. The only reason I know it exists is because Rand Carthon got asked about it instead of being asked real questions. But it's not like I went and researched what happened with Drake and Kendrick Lamar. I don't care. And so I feel like, I see people like this that, socially or politically or whatever. I see people that are like, they're too online. They're too on Twitter. And I feel like the NFL must be too online with this Kendrick Lamar halftime show. It was a disgrace to the Super Bowl halftime show. And I get it. Again, you can't get Aerosmith out there. They're too old. But you got to do better than that. Whoever does the Super Bowl halftime show has to be able to sell out a stadium. Like, you have to be able to sell out Dallas Cowboy Stadium. And if you can sell out Dallas Cowboy Stadium, then you can play the Super Bowl halftime show. Frazier, do we think that Kendrick Lamar can sell out the Super Bowl halftime show?
No, I'm not in camp of it.
I mean, do we think he could sell out Cowboy Stadium?
No.
So, again, you got to sell them out. Apparently, Kendrick Lamar, and who is SZA?
Oh, SZA.
Who is that?
I have no clue.
Apparently, they're having a joint tour that are doing stadiums. I bet it does terribly. So now he's going to try stadiums. You need to do stadiums before you get the Super Bowl halftime show. I mean, I thought that was terrible. I thought it was terrible last night. Just horrible. And again, when people say, you don't get it, my point to this is it's the Super Bowl halftime show. Everybody is supposed to get it. So I'm glad I got that off my chest. Horrible last night. 615-737-1025. We'll get to some of your phones because a lot of you want to weigh in on the Jalen Hurts thing. And I will just say this. I had one really, really strong rooting interest. Like, one very strong rooting interest last night in the Super Bowl. And we'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. We are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee, and I am reading some of your texts on the Super Bowl halftime show, and there's a bunch of people that are saying this over and over again. You know, somebody says, the point of this halftime show wasn't to entertain, it was to inform, and it sent a strong message. Well, again, I don't want to turn into Bill O'Reilly over here, but whatever the message was, I didn't get it. And I, again, trying to be honest with the folks out here, it's the Super Bowl halftime show. I'm not really interested in your message. Like, I'm really more so interested in the performance. Like, if I want to watch CNN, I'll watch CNN. If I want to watch Super Bowl halftime show, I'll watch Super Bowl halftime show. And for the amount of people out there that's like, it wasn't for you, I'm like, yes, it was for me. It's the Super Bowl halftime show. I am a 35-year-old person. I am squarely in what they call the decision-making demographics, which means I make decisions on what items to buy. My son is 8 weeks old. He doesn't choose what brand of stroller he goes in. I do. Again, I'm right in the demographics. So when you say that the Super Bowl halftime show wasn't for me, who was it for? So again, I never remember after the Justin Timberlake Super Bowl halftime show, people being like, you don't get it. I mean, I got the Justin Timberlake halftime show fine. I thought he did a great job. So I do want to get to this, though, because I was a little torn on the Brady Mahomes debate. The rooting interest I had, and I do not like the Eagles. If both teams could have lost last night, that is what I would have preferred. I can't stand the Eagles. I think their fans are obnoxious. I think they're incredibly smug. And I think AJ, again, tells a different narrative than what really happened at the end here. And all of that bothers me. But I wanted them to win. And I wanted them to win because I'm a Tom Brady fan. I am a Tom Brady fan. I covered Brady, when he was with the Patriots and I was in New Hampshire. I watched Brady from afar with envy and glee and joy. And I was sad when Brady retired the first time. I was really sad when Brady retired the second time because I knew he was retiring for good. I have always been a Tom Brady fan. You all know that. So the rooting interest I had in the game was that I didn't want Mahomes to win. Because if Kansas City had won the game, I think the Brady-Mahomes argument would have been legit. It's funny because we had Jason Anderson on the show from Sports Radio 810 in Kansas City and at the Super Bowl, and he was basically making the argument that, oh no, Mahomes has already passed Brady, which is ridiculous. But he was starting to make that point, and the Chiefs were ahead of the Patriots, and that's great. But it's not really where they were. The Kansas City Chiefs had the opportunity yesterday. And Patrick Mahomes, because again, it's Mahomes' dynasty the same way it was Brady's dynasty in Foxborough. They had the opportunity to do something that Tom Brady and the New England Patriots never did. And instead, not only did they lose, they got smoked. No three-peat, no fourth title in 6 years, etc. And coming close doesn't really mean anything because Tom Brady, we don't bring this up enough. Tom Brady went to the bench in all of his Super Bowl losses with the lead in the fourth quarter. I mean, Brady went to the bench with the lead in the fourth quarter of a Super Bowl in which his team was competing for an undefeated season, and it took the most miraculous helmet catch in order to dethrone them. But guess what? They lost. And I'm not taking anything away from Mahomes. Mahomes is special, and everybody knows that. And trust me, the Chiefs are going to load it back up. Like, they're going to be good next year, and they're going to be good the year after that, and they're going to be good for probably the next 10 years, assuming that Mike Borgonzi isn't the total brains of that operation. And as much as I'd love to believe that's the case, I tend to doubt it. Mahomes will be back in the AFC title game next year. Because no matter what happens, Mahomes is always in the AFC title game. But I really felt like in order to endanger the Patriots, they had to three-peat. They had to three-peat because it's the one thing the Patriots didn't do. And without that win yesterday, the Patriots dynasty versus the Chiefs dynasty, the Patriots have everything that Kansas City already has. 3 Super Bowl wins in 6 years. Brady has that. In fact, the Patriots did that twice. Kansas City's only done it once. And that's not a knock on the Chiefs, but that's just recognizing that in order to be the greatest there ever was, there is a certain level of achievement that you have to hit. And think about all the things the Patriots have done that the Chiefs haven't done. For starters, I don't know, 6 titles to 3 titles? I think that's a pretty good start. Number 2, again, they came back from down 25 points in the Super Bowl and pulled it off. Kansas City has not. Kansas City had a shot. When it was 24-0 yesterday, I was like, all right, here we go, baby. Let's go see if you can go beat the GOAT. Because I knew they couldn't. And they never came close. I even made a joke on Twitter yesterday. I said Mahomes should have run out of the back of the end zone, made it 26-0, and then go prove you're better than Brady. Because he came back from 25 against the Falcons. Let's see if you can come back at 26. But they couldn't. I mean, Brady went to another team. Left the only coach he ever had, left his offensive coordinators, basically left everything he had ever had in his entire life with the exception of Gronk, and won the Super Bowl there. And Brady beat Mahomes twice, including once in the Super Bowl. So, I mean, again, no disrespect to Mahomes. He's an all-time great. 5 years ago, when we celebrated the 100th year of the NFL season, they had the NFL 100. You know, the greatest players of all time. And they brought them all on the field in Miami, and they wheeled Don Shula out there, and it was great. And the quarterbacks were, I think, Otto Graham and Sammy Baugh and Roger Staubach and Dan Marino, John Elway, Brett Favre, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, and I feel like I'm leaving one out. And since then, Aaron Rodgers has won 2 MVPs and Mahomes has won 3 Super Bowls. And so I believe we should kick out Marino and we should kick out Favre and we should put Mahomes and we should put Rodgers in, especially Mahomes. And there's no question that he is an all-time great. Montana was in that group too. There's no doubt that Mahomes is an all-time great. But we're not talking about is he an all-time great. We're talking about is he the best ever. And in order to be the best ever, you have to do something that the other guy who currently has the title hasn't done. Has Mahomes won a title without Andy Reid? Nope. Brady won a title without Belichick. Has Mahomes won 6 championships? Nope. Tom Brady won 7. Last night was the opportunity to do something that Tom Brady had never done. And that was to three-peat. That's why if they get back to the Super Bowl next year, and again, considering the fact that it's the Chiefs, it would not surprise me if they do. But even if they win that title, there's really still, okay, great. Now you're at 4. They're at 6. Now you're at 4. He's at 7. There's really nothing to bring to the table if you're Kansas City, even if you win next year, other than people just saying, well, I just think he's better than Brady, which is what a lot of people believe. And then I do think there has to be something said for the fact that Tom Brady didn't get run out of Super Bowls. He almost got run out of a Super Bowl, and then he came back and he won the game. Tom Brady has never lost a blowout Super Bowl. And yesterday was a total blowout. So I can tell you all these things that Brady has done that Mahomes hasn't done, but I can't come up with anything that Mahomes has done that Tom Brady hasn't done. In fact, I think that now the discussion is, can he get to 4 like Montana? And is it better to be 3-2 where you've been to 5 than it is to be Montana to go 4-0? But again, Mahomes' story is not over. So there is still more to be written. And I get that. I am not knocking that. I am not saying that Kansas City couldn't be in the Super Bowl next year. I'm not saying that Kansas City couldn't reel off the next 3 Super Bowls in a row, because he is that kind of quarterback. But he has to do those things before we start to have the discussion again. And I will say this, I don't know how I would have felt, because I heard a lot of people in New Orleans that were saying if Mahomes gets this and they three-peat, he's ahead of Brady. And then there are some other people that are like, no, 7 is better than 4. But there would have been an argument. And I think after this one, I just don't think there's an argument. There was an argument for almost 90% of Tom Brady's career that Peyton Manning was a better quarterback than him. And then all of a sudden, Brady rolled off 3 more Super Bowls. And then he went to Tampa and won 1. And then it was over. So maybe Mahomes can get back into the discussion with Brady. But after last night, he's not even in the same stratosphere as Tom Brady. And Tom Brady is in one all by himself, as he should be. And let me just say this. You cannot tell me that there was anybody last night who was happier. Now, he didn't let it show through on the broadcast because he's not Tony Romo. And Tony Romo, whenever the Cowboys, when he calls a Cowboy game, can't hide his gleeful joy for the Cowboys. Brady didn't let it out there that Brady was clearly the happiest guy in the building last night. But how could he not have been? To be sitting up there and doing a game where a guy who you've beaten twice in the playoffs, with a guy who, again, has not even half the amount of championships you have, and people are starting to put his name next to your name, and if he wins, he will have done something that you didn't do. How could Brady not have been jumping for joy like Nick Sirianni when Cooper DeJean took that pass to the house? Because, again, without that win yesterday, the Patriots dynasty and Brady versus Mahomes, they have everything on the Chiefs and on Mahomes. And that's not a knock on the Chiefs, but that's just recognizing that to be the best, again, there is a certain level of achievement that you have to hit. And Mahomes couldn't do it last night. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number. We'll get to your phones on all of this. 615-737-1025. Plus, there is somebody who, I don't know what kind of blame they're receiving. Maybe they're receiving some. Maybe they're not receiving any. I don't know. But they get 0 blame for me. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
In attendance, but she hasn't had much to cheer about yet because Travis Kelce hasn't caught a ball. Keep in mind, last year's Super Bowl first half, he had 1 catch, 2 for a yard, and then he went off in the second half. So a long way to go.
Here's Mahomes. 4-man rush over the middle. It's intercepted again. This time it's Zach Bond, and the Eagles are set up inside the 10.
Little pressure here. Tooney steps on Patrick and Bond, outstretched arms. Wow. What a catch. The all-pro linebacker. You got sweat on Tooney. Pushes him into Patrick. A little off balance as he throws. Bond reads his eyes. And a diving catch from a guy that used to play on the Saints on the line of scrimmage, rushing the quarterback. They moved him to middle linebacker this year on a 1-year contract. One of the signings of the season by Howie Roseman.
That was the Zach Bond interception that, again, Kansas City was down 10-0, which for a lot of teams is a red alert, but not for Kansas City. Then Mahomes throws the pick 6 to Cooper DeJean. Now it's 17-0. Now you're in trouble. Like, now you're okay. Like, it's getting a little serious. Now you throw the interception from your own end zone, and they're going to score again before the half, and now it's DEFCON 1 for the Kansas City Chiefs last night. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com. One text says, Brady never got his ass beat like that during a championship game. And I forgot to ask early, Jared, are you surprised that Andy Reid couldn't figure out a way to help his quarterback? That was probably the most shocking thing to me, was they had 0 answers. And let me just say this. Last night in a vacuum, Andy Reid gets 0 blame from me. This offensive guru, who we consider to be one of the best offensive coaches of our time, if not the best offensive coach of this century. You'd have to go back, in the last century, Walsh and Lombardi and others that are certainly up there. But it does feel like Andy Reid is ahead of McVay. He's ahead, clearly, of Shanahan. Like, he is the offensive coach of this era. But I do not blame him for not being able to adjust last night. Andy Reid, the coach, has to be separated here from Andy Reid, the man who has final say over the Kansas City Chiefs roster. Because I can point a finger at Andy Reid, the team builder, over Andy Reid, the coach. It's very easy with Philadelphia to say Nick Sirianni's the coach. Or really, in the case of Philadelphia, Kellen Moore gets credit for the offense, Vic Fangio gets credit for the defense, and Howie Roseman gets credit for the players. That's easy. In Kansas City, Andy does all of that. Spagnuolo with the defense, but Andy runs the show. So let's take Andy, the team builder, put him to the side for a second. And let's talk about Andy, the coach. Andy, the coach, was paper clipping and gumming the wide receiving core and the offensive line together all throughout the years. They didn't have a left tackle. They were playing a left guard at tackle. I mean, their wide receivers outside of Worthy, who is a one-trick pony, their wide receivers, I mean, they got nothing. They got DeAndre, who couldn't catch the ball when the game really mattered. And by the way, we're going to have to talk about DeAndre because he went and cried again after the game last night. Where the Chiefs have to look in the mirror is when we turn our attention to Andy, the team builder. Andy, the coach. Philadelphia didn't blitz one time. This is where having an experienced coach like Vic Fangio, who's gone up against Andy Reid, who won't get drawn in and sucked into the smoke and mirrors and everything else, the enormity of the moment, that's not going to bother Vic Fangio. Just like it's not going to bother Jim Schwartz because of how much experience Jim Schwartz has. So Vic Fangio knew they can't block my 4 guys. And then we'll just keep rotating new guys in there, and we'll just go get after the quarterback. And that's how we're going to win the game. And because the Chiefs didn't have a left tackle, since their left tackle was really their left guard, and by not having a left tackle means they don't have a left guard, and their right tackle, Jawan Taylor, sucks. With all of that going on at one time, they couldn't block. You can't block, you can't win. We all know that. So there's nothing Andy, the coach, could have done. There, in my opinion, is not an adjustment Andy could have made. Andy could have had the greatest game plan in the history of the NFL. And if you can't block the other team's front four, unless your defense nets you 10, 17 points, you don't have a chance. But where the Chiefs have to look in the mirror is Andy, the team builder. They took a left tackle in the second round this year in the draft, Kingsley Suamataye, and they didn't play him. They took a tackle in the third round last year, Wanye Morris, and they didn't play him. They're paying Jawan Taylor a bunch of money, and he stinks. Again, Tooney is a great guard, but he's a guard. He's not a tackle. So the Chiefs and their F- owner are going to have to spend some money this offseason, because you cannot do what they did last night and expect to beat a team that is just coming after you with a pass rush. And this was a bad matchup for Kansas City. And I think deep down inside, Andy, the coach, knew it. And I bet Andy, the coach, is looking at Andy, the team builder, and he's saying, man, where are we going wrong on the offensive line? Because this isn't just a one-year thing with Kansas City, even though they won last year. Remember, they paper clipped it at left tackle last year by getting Donovan Smith from Tampa Bay on his last legs to play left tackle for them. So I separate Andy, the team builder, from Andy, the coach. But Andy, the coach, in my opinion, zero blame. And it's kind of crazy because the Chiefs are 3-2 in the Super Bowl under Andy Reid. And Andy, in both games, has lost the same way. Could not stop the front four of the other team. Whether it was Shaq Barrett, Vita Vea, JPP, or Ndamukong Suh in Tampa Bay, or this collection of guys with Josh Sweat and Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith and all the guys, Williams, who I'd never heard of before, all these guys on the Eagles, they couldn't block them. Well, at least there was an excuse for what happened in the first Super Bowl. The left tackle tore his Achilles. The other tackle got hurt. So they didn't have a tackle. Like putting PT out there. There's no excuse for what happened yesterday to Andy, the team builder. But Andy, the coach, if you can't block, there's nothing you can do. So I'm not surprised that they didn't have an answer. And I'm not surprised that Mahomes looked as crazy and as awful and as discombobulated as he did, because, again, he had no time back there. He was just, he was getting housed. He's got the one interception where the tackle's leg gets pushed into him as he's throwing. And I think, too, the Eagles, and we talk about matchups. If the Chiefs had drawn Detroit, now I'm not sure Detroit would have beaten Philadelphia. Philadelphia was tough. But what Detroit would have done is they would have gotten the ball out quicker on Philadelphia than Jaden Daniels would have and then Mahomes would have. Because, again, with a Goff, boom, ball's out. The team that gave them the most trouble, the Rams. Why? Because Stafford, when he sees that pressure, boom, ball comes out. So that, for me, is something that I'm keeping an eye on is, hey, we talk about these mobile quarterbacks and these guys that are dancing in the backfield, and Mahomes dances in the backfield. He turns around and he uncorks a rocket and it hits a guy right in the hands. Wow, it's great. It's incredible. It's this, it's that. But the guy who was closest to beating the Eagles this year, Stafford. And again, it's because with Stafford, if he sees that rush coming, boom, ball's out. I think the Rams would have been a bad matchup for the Chiefs with Jared Verse and those guys. I think the Chiefs would have easily handled the Lions with their lack of a pass rush. 615-737-1025. We'll get back into your phones. That's 615-737-1025. And there was one thing as a Titan fan. There was one thing about last night's game that hurt. It hurt as a Titan fan. And it wasn't A.J. Brown. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5 The Game.
Coming over from Tennessee and then to Philadelphia, I was ecstatic when you got here, man. It's been a big transformation in your career, but you got to be satisfied with just the outcome of everything, regardless of how it looked.
Yeah. It's truly a blessing. You know, I appreciate my time in Tennessee, but Howie came and got me, and Howie does a great job each and every year preparing us and getting a great team together. Yeah. And I'm glad he did. And, you know, and his team went through tough times, came up short one time, got here. The next year we crumbled a little bit, but it's all worth it.
It was AJ last night after they won the championship. And I'm sure there are a lot of Titan fans that saw AJ Brown last night winning the title and said, oh, it hurts as a Titan fan to watch AJ Brown win the title. I saw Chase tweet out, good for AJ or something like that, or I'm happy for AJ or what. I don't care about AJ Brown. But that's not what hurt me. You may say it hurt you to see AJ Brown score a touchdown, though it was kind of a meaningless touchdown. And AJ, I think, had 34 receiving yards. And you may say that's what hurt you. And I understand. Because the trading of AJ Brown, which was a move I agreed with at the time, or agreed with might be a little strong. It wasn't like I was saying they need to trade AJ, but they made it. And I'm like, I get it. And it was a god-awful move, and it's the kind of move that should get somebody fired. The A.J. Brown trade is not what hurt me watching last night's game. What hurt me was thinking about what could have been in 2021. With Harold Landry, pre-ACL tear, Jeffrey Simmons, when he was well-featured as like the 7th most important player on the Titans. He got the 7th most amount of attention. He got less attention than Tannehill, Henry, AJ, Byard, somewhere in there. Danico Autry, who is a dog. And Rand Carthon let him walk out the door. And a healthy Bud Dupree. That same group that got 8 sacks in the playoff game against Cincinnati. I can't even remember if it was 8 or 9 anymore. But they got 9 sacks in the playoff game against Cincinnati and still lost. And I've never truly forgiven Ryan Tannehill, or I shouldn't say forgiven. Maybe I've forgiven Ryan Tannehill, but I haven't forgotten what Ryan Tannehill did, throwing those 3 interceptions against the Bengals in the playoffs. Because I felt like if the Titans got past Cincinnati, the Titans were going to win the Super Bowl. And the way the draw came out, it was perfect for the Titans. The Titans had already played Kansas City that year and had absolutely beaten the ever-loving crap out of the Chiefs. 27-3 at Nissan Stadium, and it wasn't even that close. They would have got Kansas City back at Nissan Stadium in the AFC Championship game. And I have to think, if they had survived the Bengal game, that Derrick Henry in that second game, he would have kind of been back to Derrick Henry coming off the foot injury. But also, again, Vrabel, great coach against Andy Reid for whatever reason. And the Titans defensive line had dominated earlier in the season. Dominated Kansas City the same way they dominated Cincinnati in the playoff game and the same way the Eagles dominated last night. And then they would have drawn the Rams in the Super Bowl. And they had already gone on the road to SoFi Stadium and beaten the Rams with the same defensive line dominance earlier in the year. So when I saw last night's game and I saw Patrick Mahomes and just looking as lost and as just incapable of doing anything last night. When I saw that, I thought to myself, I've seen that Mahomes before. I turned on some TV today, and I heard them on the TV, and they were sitting there talking about, I've never seen Patrick Mahomes look that bad before. And I'm sitting there thinking, I have. I saw it against the Titans in October of 2021, and I know that was 3.5 years ago, but I saw it. And so watching the Eagles' defensive line just utterly dominate Kansas City's offensive line, I thought that's what would have happened at Nissan Stadium in that AFC title game. Again, I don't know what level I'll ever truly get over the Titans blowing what should have been their Super Bowl in 2000 when they lost to the Ravens. I was never upset about the loss to the Rams. I mean, I was sad that they lost to the Rams, but I was never angry about that loss in the Super Bowl. I wasn't angry about the 2002 loss. I was a little angry that Drew Bennett dropped the ball in 2003 against the Patriots. Had no problem with 07, 08. 2018, I think I was, 29 or 17, excuse me. You should have just been happy to be there. 2020, a holding call on Dennis Kelly in the AFC title game. You're up 17-7, but Mahomes' magic is what it is. But the Tannehill 3 interceptions. That's the one. That's the one that, again, I know that it's not Baltimore 2000 level. That was your Super Bowl, but it's pretty close. And I have always felt, Jason Anderson came on our show last week from Kansas City, and I was like, they owe Ryan Tannehill, a gift basket for all their success for knocking off Brady and Lamar before they played in the AFC title game in 2000 and then choking in, or excuse me, in 2020 and then choking in 2021. And Jason was like, oh, they would have come into Nashville and they would have beaten them. No, they wouldn't have. Like, I'm just telling you right now, it would have looked like it looked yesterday because I had already seen it. And that's the part that hurts. So people say that A.J. Brown, that's what hurt them, and I get it. The direct correlation of when the Titans had A.J. Brown, they were good, and then they traded him to the Eagles, and the Eagles have been Super Bowl contenders ever since, and the Titans have sucked, which is fair. But that's not what hurts me. What hurts me is, again, going back to what could have been. And maybe my life would be a much better place if I could just let go of what could have been from time to time. But, man, watching Kansas City's offensive line just get torched by that pass rush brought back those Bud Dupree, Jeffrey Simmons, Danico Autry, and pre-ACL tear Harold Landry memories. Texter into the text line says, yesterday is the reason why you take Abdul Carter with the first pick. Well, I think yesterday is a reason of why the valuable positions in the NFL are quarterback number 1, pass rusher, left tackle, and wide receiver. And everything else does not, and I'll throw right tackle in that because, again, we know the right tackle story. So we'll just say tackle. Quarterback, tackle, pass rusher, receiver. I don't need to pay any other position on my team. Now, I will, because when I get a linebacker like Roquan Smith, he makes a difference. When I get a tight end like Travis Kelce, although last night he did not make a difference, but when I get a great tight end, he makes a difference. Now, the thing about the Kelce tight ends are those guys are basically just big receivers. Like Gronk. I mean, Bowers. Those guys are big receivers. Who cares about their blocking? But that's what you pay. Receivers, pass rushers, quarterbacks, and edge rushers. Period. So when the Titans draft a guard with the 11th overall pick, or they make excuses for why their $23 million defensive lineman doesn't get after the quarterback, I ignore it. And I hear all you guys pout when you guys say, Jeffrey Simmons is the one taking up all the double teams in order to allow the other guys to not get the sacks. I don't give a rat's ass. Then don't pay him $23 million and go pay somebody 10 to go take up double team so I can go pay somebody $23 million to go get after the quarterback. But that's what really matters. And that's why I have always said, if I'm taking Travis Hunter with the first pick, he's playing receiver. But Jared, he's a lockdown corner. He could be the best corner in the league. Let me ask you, where was Derek Stingley's team? Where was Patrick Surtain's team? Where was Sauce Gardner's team? Because those are the best corners in the league. That's like when they drafted Peter Skoronski and people said, he's going to be like Quentin Nelson, which he's not. But they said he's going to be like Quentin Nelson. Yeah, and what good does that do for Quentin Nelson's team? But you see what the Chiefs look like without a tackle. Again, the Chiefs have only been beaten in these playoffs over the years by Tom Brady, and Tom Brady's pass rush, Joe Burrow, and the Eagles' defensive line. That's it. I mean, nobody's beating the Chiefs because they're good at guard. Nobody's beating the Chiefs because they have a good middle linebacker. Nobody's beating the Chiefs because they have a good safety. So, yes, yesterday, in my opinion, was a good day for Abdul Carter. 615-737-1025. More of your phones on the program on the Super Bowl at 615-737-1025. And I do have to defend somebody who I feel like is kind of getting crapped on a little bit. We'll do that next. Stillman & Company, 1025 The Game.
3rd and 16. Mahomes rolling out. Looking.
Firing. Intercepted. Picked up by Cooper DeJean. Gets a block. DeJean is in. Touchdown. Wow.
Patrick, one of the best in the world. They're just trying to get him out of the pocket to buy a little time. And he sees the crossing route coming to the left, but he loses track of DeJean as he kind of falls back and reads Patrick eyes. You can see the break. And this young stud, Cooper DeJean, another rookie making a huge impact on this Eagles defense. Since they've inserted him in the lineup, they have been absolutely unstoppable on defense.
That was the Cooper DeJean pick six. Again, Kansas City was doing nothing offensively. They were down 10-0. And then Mahomes on 3rd and 16 tries to play a little hero ball. DeJean picks it off, runs in the end zone. Now it's 17-0. 10-0. Even if it goes to 10-0 at the half, Kansas City's still okay. And you know Kansas City's okay. 10-0 at the half because they're Kansas City. And how many times have they been down by 10 points, 11 points, 14? They were down 24-0 to the Texans in a playoff game, came back and won. So 10-0 is nothing. 17-0, now all of a sudden you're in trouble. 17-0 against that offensive line and that running back, you're in trouble. And that, I think, was kind of the turning point in the game. And so a bunch of people have texted in because I said, look, Andy Reid, the coach, when it comes to Andy Reid's game plan, I'm not going to go after Andy Reid. One texter says, Andy Reid gets a lot of blame. Never tried to run the ball to slow down the pass rush. Never tried to throw screens. He was completely out-coached last night by Vic Fangio. Somebody else said, Andy gets a ton of blame because they didn't run the ball, and he went away from it. And to me, that is classic Monday morning quarterbacking. You know, one thing that drives me crazy is that coaches and general managers, and whenever they want to talk bad about talk radio or the media, they'll say things like, you guys just second guess because that's what you do. You know, this finger wagging, as if we're not talking about every decision every day. I go crazy about UC Soros and the contract they gave him with the Predators, but it wasn't like every day for 3 months leading up to them giving him the contract that we didn't talk about it every single day. And half the station said, don't give it to him. It's 17-0 in the Super Bowl. You're the Kansas City Chiefs. You cannot block the Philadelphia pass rush. But it's 17-0. Right around the 2-minute warning-ish. And you're going to take the ball out of the best player on the planet's hands? That's not a good idea. That's not a good idea. You ride with the horse that got you there. And in this case, it's Mahomes. And I would have done the same thing. You know, when the Patriots had that comeback against the Falcons, you want to know how they did that? Brady throwing the ball. They didn't turn around and say, you know what, Tom? Let's start running the ball with Dion Lewis and LeGarrette Blount. No. They said, okay, Tom, you're going to throw it more because that's what we have to do. I have no problem with Andy abandoning the run down 17-0. Can't put that on Andy. When you say, well, he should have run the ball more, well, he should have, again, Andy Reid, if they could connect with the pass, there would have been more first downs, and then they would have been able to run the ball. But you have to be able to complete a pass to come back from down 17-0. So the idea of, well, now we're going to show them, now we're going to run it. That I don't see that wouldn't have worked. Like, I don't understand how that would have worked. One texter into the text line says, Jared, how can you say that Ryan Tannehill would have won last night to discredit Jalen Hurts, which I do believe, by the way. I do believe that last night, with that defense, I believe Jared Goff wins the game last night. If he's quarterbacking the Eagles, I believe Jordan Love wins the game. Baker Mayfield wins the game. Brock Purdy wins the game. Trevor Lawrence wins the game. I mean, my question is, does Bo Nix win the game last night? If he gets that kind of defensive performance. Kansas City had 23 net yards at halftime. So the texter says, how can you admit that Tannehill would have won last night to try to discredit Hurts, but now you're saying he's the reason they lost to the Bengals when his defense had 9 sacks? I don't know, because he threw 3 interceptions in the game? Like, he's the reason they lost? But Jared, you're saying, yes, that if Ryan Tannehill played his absolute worst game of his entire career, they would not have won last night. But I'm assuming that he wouldn't have played the absolute worst game of his entire career. In fact, going back to that 21 season, I actually thought Tannehill had a pretty bad performance against the Rams on Sunday Night Football right after Derrick Henry got hurt. But it didn't matter because the defensive line dominated the Rams, and Kevin Byard had a pick 6 to start the game. And then they turned Stafford over deep inside his own territory, and they just beat the crap out of the Rams that day. And that was with Tannehill not even playing well. So, I mean, again, I think you would have won with Tannehill. I think any number of quarterbacks would have been able to win yesterday. And it's no knock on Jalen. It's just a reality of how much the Eagles defense dominated Kansas. They had 23 net yards at halftime. I cannot get over that. 23 net yards. That's like what Tajay Spears averages per game. Besides, the other thing is this. If you can't pass protect against that defensive line, what makes you think you can run it? 615-737-1025. 615-737-1025. One texter says, a perfectly bad game to sum up a bad season. I wouldn't say it was a bad season. The NFL has become more like a reality TV show now more than ever. There's news about the NFL every day, but the actual on-field product has been bad. Over half the league with losing records past the halfway point of the season, only 5 teams with a realistic shot to win the Super Bowl. For a league that preaches parity, the season was one of the worst I've ever watched. Well, it was certainly one of the worst Titan seasons. I'm not sure I'd say it was one of the worst seasons. I thoroughly enjoyed the football season, and I am sad that this football season is over. And other than that, I can live with it. The Eagles last night proved that you don't necessarily have to have the coach or the quarterback to win the Super Bowl. So does that mean the Titans actually have a chance without the coach or the quarterback? We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3, the game streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game National Studios, and we are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. Now, everybody knows that I am, like a lot of you, a huge Tennessee Titan fan. The Tennessee Titans have played in one Super Bowl. I went to the game. I was in the 4th grade. They lost at the 1-yard line, as everybody well knows, and I, right there with my dad, burst down into tears. And the next year, we were going to go back to Tampa, and the Titans had the best team in the league, and the Titans got beat by Ray Lewis and the Ravens. 2 years later, we were going to go to San Diego, but John Simon and Robert Holcomb fumbled the football, and they got beat in the AFC title game by the Ravens. Excuse me, by the Raiders. I was going to go to L.A. when they had the number 1 seed in 2021, and then Ryan Tannehill threw 3 interceptions. I am a long-suffering Titan fan, as many of you are. And I've long said, I just want one Super Bowl. That's all I want. You know, the Atlanta Braves won the World Series in 2021, and I celebrated it. I was so happy. My dad and I went to the World Series. We watched them win games 3 and 4. We were back home on TV, watched them win game 6, and they've been bounced from the first round of the playoffs ever since then, and I haven't been mildly upset about it. Would I rather them win? Of course. But it doesn't, because I got my one right there. Like, yes. And I've said with the Titans, I just want one Super Bowl. That's it. My dad is 73. My son is 8 weeks old. I would just like one Super Bowl. I'd love one Super Bowl like 4 years from now when my dad still has his marbles and my son's old enough to remember it. You know, that the Titans win the Super Bowl. But it's hard to win the Super Bowl in the NFL if you don't have the coach. Just like it's hard to win the Super Bowl if you don't have the quarterback. Now, if you've got the coach and the quarterback, you get spoiled. The New England Patriots kept winning. The Indianapolis Colts with Dungy and Manning only won 1, but it was inevitable that they were going to win 1 with those guys because they kept knocking on the door, because every year they had the coach and the quarterback. Nolan Bradshaw, Landry and Staubach. Again, if you want to win multiple Super Bowls, you probably need to have the coach and you need to have the quarterback. But last night felt like it was proof that you can win 1. And all I've been asking for is 1 Super Bowl without the coach or the quarterback. No disrespect to Nick Sirianni, because he's done a lot of winning as the head coach in Philadelphia. But I talked to Robert Turbin, the old running back who used to be the backup in Seattle and played at a handful of places. And I talked to Robert Turbin about 2 weeks ago. And I said to Turbo, I go, you know, Turbo, you played for Nick Sirianni in Indianapolis when he was the OC. And you played for Brian Schottenheimer when he was the OC in Seattle. If I said to you, hey, who's the better coach? And again, not that he evaluates coaches because he's never been GM or owner or anything, but, you know, we played for both guys. If I said to you, who's the better coach, who would you say? And he, without hesitation, said Brian Schottenheimer. And again, Turbo, he didn't play for the Cowboys. He's not some cowboy-loving guy. He's like, I played for both guys, and I'm telling you, Brian Schottenheimer's the better coach. And again, that's no disrespect to Nick Sirianni, but last year, when their season was circling down the drain after he lost both his coordinators, there was nothing the great Nick Sirianni could do to stop it. Sirianni's a fine coach, but he's not a great coach. He's not McVay, who for some reason almost always has the Rams competitive. He's not Andy Reid, who may end up passing Don Shula. He's not the coach. I think we can all admit that. This time last year, there were reporters in Philadelphia calling the Florida home of Rich Kotite because they wanted his quotes for a story about how bad it had been. Angelo Cataldi, who's the longtime morning show host in Philadelphia, was going on the radio, even though he retired, he was going on the radio and begging them to fire Nick Sirianni to hire Mike Vrabel because, as he said, Mike Vrabel knows football and Sirianni didn't. And then there's Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is a good quarterback. Jalen Hurts is not a great quarterback. When Kurt Warner beat the Titans and won MVP of the Super Bowl, he threw for 400 yards in that game. Jalen threw for like 270 last night. And most of that, again, a lot of Jalen stats were kind of at the end because the defense were the ones responsible for Jalen getting a bunch of points early. And Jalen's good, but he's not great. He's not Josh Allen, and nobody is ever going to convince themselves that he is. So, could this be the path? Could the Eagles be the path? The Eagles have won 2 Super Bowls in the last decade with 2 totally different crews. The general manager is the same. But outside of that, Nick Foles was the quarterback. Doug Peterson was the coach. The players, again, almost all different. Brandon Graham, Lane Johnson, those guys were there, but again, totally different crews. Their entire defense is different than the defense that went to the Super Bowl 2 years ago. So could this be the blueprint for the Titans to do all I want, which is 1 Super Bowl? So how do you do it? How do you do it without lucking into the best quarterback? Again, we talk about Brian Callahan, and when we were at the Super Bowl, there were all these people talking about, in Cincinnati, what they did. And in Cincinnati, they sucked and got Joe Burrow. That's what they did. And then Joe Burrow got hurt, and so they sucked again, and they got Jamar Chase. That's what they did. And it is a travesty that they haven't made the playoffs in the last 2 years with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, because they are both generational players. So forget about that. So how do you do it the Eagle way? The Eagles haven't had the number 1 pick or the number 2 pick. Again, they've completely rebuilt their team. From Doug Peterson and Carson Wentz to Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni, it's a totally different cast of characters. What they've done is, number 1, they've gone out and they have taken the coordinator positions seriously. Not, we want a guy who we think can be good. They go out and get guys that actually are good. Vic Fangio is a great defensive coordinator. They paid for him. They didn't get Denard Wilson to see if he could be any good. No, they went out and they got a real coordinator. Kellen Moore doesn't even run the same offense that Sirianni runs. But they had to go get the best coordinators. Number 2, they get after the other team's quarterback, and they put a value on that. First-round picks, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith. Howie Roseman's been using first-round picks on defensive linemen for years. Number 3, they protect their quarterback. They pay. They're all pro tackles. They pay. And they draft in order to build the offensive line. And what they do is they prepare to make changes before they have to. Their guard, Isaac Suomatalo, or whatever his name is, left in free agency, they were already ready because they had drafted Landon Dickerson and they had drafted Cam Jurgen, and they were ready. So they protect their quarterback. They get after the other team's quarterback. Here's number 4. This one's very, very important. They pay. Why is A.J. Brown an Eagle and not a Titan? Because they didn't want to pay him. Why is Saquon Barkley an Eagle and not a Giant? Because they didn't want to pay him. They've paid Jalen Hurts, Jordan Mailata, Lane Johnson, Dallas Goedert, Devontae Smith. They pay. They will pay Jalen Carter. When they pay Jalen Carter next offseason, he will be the highest paid defensive player in the league. Because they pay. and they don't screw up on special teams. So if you've got an owner that pays and you're willing to go out and get the best coordinators and you're willing to, hey, build this thing on the defensive line, go get them, then you can win without the quarterback and the coach. The problem is that it takes both smarts and discipline in order to be able to do it. You guys bitch and bitch and bitch about how John Robinson whiffed on Isaiah Wilson and Caleb Farley. And, well, guess what? Howie Roseman whiffed on Andre Dillard in the first round. And the next year, he took Jalen Reagor 1 pick before Justin Jefferson. But they didn't fire him because, again, they knew he was a good general manager. Do you have the discipline to be able to do that? The fans in Philadelphia demanded, after the just tire fire that ended their season, that Nick Sirianni get the boot. They didn't do it. And again, when it comes to bringing in Vic Fangio, bringing in Kellen Moore, bringing in Saquon Barkley, bringing in A.J. Brown, again, what do the Eagles do? They pay. So if you want to be like and again, I just want one Super Bowl. The Eagles might be the blueprint. It's hard to do because it's hard to build a team like the Eagles, but it's possible. Which means it's possible for somebody not named Manning, Brady, Roethlisberger, Mahomes to win a Super Bowl. It's possible for Trevor Lawrence to win a Super Bowl. It's possible for Dak Prescott to win a Super Bowl. And Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni are living proof. So that should give you at least some optimism. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. That being said, I don't have a lot of hope when it comes to this collection of the Titans figuring it out. And there's one particular reason. And last week, this bothered me at the Super Bowl. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. it feels to me like, again, you brought up the Packers. They want to be the Packers. Big Mike McCarthy's warming up in the bullpen for somebody. I mean, is Callahan kind of a lame duck coach?
I don't think he's a lame duck coach, but there's a lot on the line for him this year. I do think they have some sympathy for the situation that he was in last year. And I think a big part of it is like feeling like they didn't do enough to support him, and so you had a guy who he's first-time play caller and a first-time head coach. He's learning to do those two things. Meanwhile, you have a first-time offensive coordinator, a first-time defensive coordinator, a first-time special teams coordinator. You had his dad on the staff as a former head coach, but you weren't backstopped by a ton of experience anywhere there.
Sure.
And I think back to Sean McVay in Los Angeles, where that first year he was able to sort of farm the defense out to Wade Phillips and didn't have to really worry about it as much, I just think there was the sense that I got was like Callie's a really bright coaching prospect, and they view him that way, who had a bumpy first year because he had to learn a lot of stuff on the job, and maybe we didn't provide him with the safety nets that he needed to adjust, and hopefully he's better for it, but we paid a price for it last year.
That was Albert Breer on our show at the Super Bowl. And if that's the line of thinking, that's incredibly flawed because their offensive coordinator, Nick Holtz, has no experience, and their defensive coordinator, Denard Wilson, has no experience. And so I'm going to say something about Nick Sirianni that I truly believe is why he's a Super Bowl champion this morning. Do you guys remember how vicious the hot seat in Philadelphia was for Nick Sirianni last year? Nick Sirianni had a meeting after they got drubbed in the wild card round by Tampa Bay. Again, defending NFC champions, they go on the road to Tampa Bay, get their booty spanked. I mean, belt to tush. And they get spanked. And Nick Sirianni's on the hot seat. And Nick Sirianni, people didn't know. Is Nick Sirianni going to keep his job? And he had a meeting with Howie Roseman and with Jeffrey Lurie, the owner, and they came out of that with Nick Sirianni's our guy. They held a press conference with Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni, and it was a train wreck. But what'd he do? He made staff changes. Supposedly, Doug Peterson, after the 2020 season, had a meeting with Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman and was asked to make similar staff changes, and Doug Peterson said no. Sirianni made them. And he did what either Brian Callahan won't do or what the Titans don't feel like Brian Callahan should do or are unwilling to pay for, which are those staff changes. He went out and got real coordinators to run the offense and the defense. Vic Fangio is a farm out the defense. Here's the defense, coach. It's yours kind of coach. And Kellen Moore, who doesn't run the West Coast offense that Shane Steichen was running, that Brian Johnson, who succeeded Shane Steichen, was running, but instead runs that Air Coryell, the Don Coryell offense. He came in, and look at what a difference it made. So what did Brian Callahan do? Again, Nick Holtz is his offensive coordinator. Now, I know that Callahan is basically the de facto offensive coordinator of this team because he calls the plays. But what did he do? He kept Nick Holtz as offensive coordinator. He's not giving up the play calling and having somebody else run it. He won't do that. Anytime they ask him about changing the play caller, which, again, I thought it was overblown, this idea that they hired a coach that never called plays. But anytime they ask him, he's like, well, I think I'm a pretty good play caller. He's not giving it up. So he won't make that change to the offensive coordinator. Fine. Defensive coordinator, Denard Wilson. The Titans were 30th in the NFL. 30th in a league of 32 teams. They were 30th in points allowed. Did they make any changes to the defensive coaching staff? Chris Harris left, but Paul Kaharski said that was because he wanted to leave. Clint McMillan left, but that was because he was going to be the defensive line coach of the New England Patriots, which is a promotion. So did they make any real staff changes on the defensive side of the ball, with the defense finished 30th in the NFL, never got meaningful stops, couldn't beat quarterbacks like Mac Jones? No. So how can the Titans be like the Eagles when, again, the Eagles will take a coach with a great record who had made the playoffs, and they will say, hey, coach, you got to make changes. And coach says, okay, now you got to pay for them, but I'll go out and get Vic Fangio and hand Vic Fangio the defense and say, here's the defense, Vic, it's yours. The only thing the Titans did that with was the special teams coach, and the way Callahan and the way it sounds based on the reporting is that was just pure kicking and screaming. That was, okay, we're going to get you Bones Fossil to run the special teams, and we're going to pay Bones Fossil to run the special teams. You're going to have to fire Colt Anderson. But I can't. He's just such a great coach. I can't do it. I can't. Where's the Titans defensive guru coach? And let me say this. That's a good start. Bones Fossil in, that is a real coordinator. Colt Anderson out, that is a bozo. Good start. But where's the Titans? If Brian Callahan's going to call the plays, which again, I'm fine with. If Brian Callahan's going to run the offense, which again, I'm fine with. If that's going to be the case, where is the defensive guru coach who you hire that's got 47,000 years of experience and you just give them the defense? Where's that guy? And I have heard that one of the things Brian Callahan reflected on this past offseason or this past season is that he feels like he needs to be more involved with the other facets of the game outside of the offense. And I think that's a terrible idea. I think Brian Callahan needs to go get a real defensive coach and needs to just hand them the defense and say, it's yours. Where's Steve Wilkes or Robert Saleh or Brandon Staley or Wade Phillips or Lou Anarumo or Dennis Allen? You could have been in the mix for any of those guys. Lou Anarumo went to the Colts. You couldn't have got Lou Anarumo? What about bringing in a guy with real experience as the offensive coordinator to kind of be there to tell Callahan, like, no. Or what about a guy like Bobby Slowick, who runs the same offense, has been the right-hand man in San Francisco to the head coach who calls plays. So, like, you know what? Let's get a little two-headed monster here. Bobby Slowick, you're helping. You're the right-hand man to Callahan. Nope. Going to run it back. And there's a part of me, before I just throw Callahan under the bus for all of this, there is a part of me that thinks that maybe the Titans don't want to spend money for what it takes to get the Vic Fangios of the world, or I think was the 49ers made Saleh the highest paid assistant coach in the NFL. That the Titans aren't interested in that because the way they view it is deep down inside, like, we're probably going to fire Callahan next year anyway. So instead of having to pay all these coordinators extra years, when we have to go get new coordinators next year, let's just wait and then fire him. And when we make Matt Nagy the head coach, Matt Nagy will go get his defensive coordinator and farm out the ball. But if it's good enough for Kyle Shanahan, and it's good enough for Sean McVay, because Sean McVay farms out the defensive side of the ball. Remember when he hired Wade Phillips? Wade, you've got the defense. So if it's good enough for those guys, Andy Reid farms out the defensive side of the ball to Steve Spagnuolo. And Nick Sirianni fired his handpicked defensive coordinator, Sean Desai, and his successor to Shane Steichen as the offensive coordinator, Brian Johnson, to bring in Kellen Moore, a guy he'd never worked with, and Vic Fangio, an old pawpaw who's in charge, and he's reaping the benefits because of it now. Even Mike freaking Vrabel went out and got an OC who, you know as well as I do, even though he's got some of the Vrabel buddies like Jason Hodling on the coaching staff, Vrabel is handing the offense to Josh McDaniels. Why can't they do that here? Why do they refuse to do it? Why is Denard Wilson back as the defensive coordinator? Somebody help me out with this. 615-737-1025. We'll get to your phone. 615-737-1025 on Stillman and Company, 1025 and 1063 The Game.
Well, Taylor Swift is in attendance, but she hasn't had much to cheer about yet because Travis Kelce hasn't caught a ball. Keep in mind, last year's Super Bowl first half, he had one catch, too, for a yard, and then he went off in the second half. So a long way to go.
Here's Mahomes. Four-man rush over the middle. It's intercepted again. This time it's Zach Bond, and the Eagles are set up inside the 10.
Little pressure here. Tooney steps on Patrick, and Bond, outstretched arms. What a catch. The all-pro linebacker. You got Sweat on Tooney. Pushes him into Patrick. A little off balance as he throws. Bond reads his eyes. And a diving catch from a guy that used to play on the Saints on the line of scrimmage, rushing the quarterback. They moved him to middle linebacker this year on a one-year contract. One of the signings of the season by Howie Roseman.
By the way, as I have complained today about Jalen Hurts being the game's MVP, which I didn't think Jalen Hurts deserved to be the game's MVP, I would have given it to Josh Sweat or Cooper DeJean. Sweat had 2.5 sacks, and in what was probably the play that ended the game. 17-0. They intercept right before the halftime. Now it's over. Sweat pushes Tooney into Mahomes. That's why he should be Super Bowl MVP. Did anybody hear DeAndre Hopkins after the game last night? I got to tell you, DeAndre Hopkins was fine in 2023 as a member of the Titans, but I really, really am off-put by DeAndre Hopkins. And it has really nothing to do with the fact that, DeAndre Hopkins seems to always get on Twitter to call me a racist, and that's his business. But it's just the constant pouting and bitching and whining and crying. Did you guys hear DeAndre after the game? So the entire country has been fixated for 3 weeks on how the Chiefs get all the calls, which I do think the Chiefs get a lot of calls because they're a great team, the way Jordan got a lot of calls, the way Brady got a lot of calls. Like, that's just the reality. But I don't think that it was any sort of transgression or conspiracy theory or anything like that. So after the game last night, a game that no official, Tim Donaghy, could not have saved the Chiefs last night. The referees from the movie Remember the Titans, the racist ones, could not have saved the Eagles or the Chiefs last night from that Eagle front four. DeAndre, after the game, had to give his thoughts on the refs.
I saw a lot of things in the media about the refs, but obviously what y'all gonna say now about the refs and us when there was a lot of touchy calls? Are y'all gonna report that? Are y'all gonna talk about the refs now?
Holy crap, what a freaking crybaby. And not only that, DeAndre dropped early in the game when it mattered. DeAndre dropped a pass that probably is a first down that allows the Chiefs to get some momentum on offense and everything else. And there were some Titan fans last week after DeAndre admitted to crying his way off the team, pouting in public, quitting on the team. There were Titan fans that tweeted in when I said, this is a horrible look for the Titans. Now, if you want to put the blame on Rand Carthon, you can, and that's easy to do because he's gone. But that is a horrendous look for the Titans. And there were some Titan fans that texted into the show or called into the show last week and said, I want to see D-Hop get a ring. Like he's Steve McNair or something like that. Like if Eddie George had gone to the Cowboys and the Cowboys had been good and Eddie, fine. You know what? Good for Eddie. Go get a ring. I'm not a Ravens fan. I'm a Titans fan, so I hate the Ravens. But if Derrick Henry gets a ring, good for. But DeAndre Hopkins? That made such little sense to me. This guy is a freaking crybaby. And so after the week of pouting that DeAndre Hopkins had, I'm actually in the camp where I'm glad DeAndre Hopkins didn't win a ring because this guy is a complete and total loser. That's why he only plays on losing teams. Have you noticed that? DeAndre Hopkins only plays on losing teams. And as soon as things don't go his way, and this is in the Loser's Handbook 101, as soon as something doesn't go your way, he's got to play the card, right? Like when I said, it's kind of disrespectful and it's kind of unprofessional to get your hair cut while holding a media availability, DeAndre called me a racist because he played the race card. DeAndre has played the disrespect card. Last year, when all these teams weren't interested in trading for him, weren't interested in signing him as a free agent, He said, yeah, Dallas, they didn't want me. Detroit, they didn't want me. These teams, the Giants, they didn't want me. And now it's the crying about the refs card. He's already played the quit the team and hold out and pout on the sidelines card. It's always DeAndre. Like, at least with A.J. Brown and his antics, A.J. gets mad when his team is winning, which, it's like Michael Jordan said, if you're going to talk trash when you're behind or when it's even score. Well, if you're going to yell about not getting the ball, don't yell it when your team's down. Yell it when your team's up, because at least it's like, hey, man, I'm still giving my all on every play. I'm not worried about the scoreboard. I'm worried about producing. DeAndre Hopkins only cries when things don't go his way. I mean, he is a loser. And I'm glad that they didn't win a ring, that DeAndre Hopkins doesn't get to, bandy about as if he didn't just go ring chasing and ride the coattails to get her. I'm glad he didn't win, because he's a loser. Get up there and cry about the referees. Bro, it was 34-0. And he's up there crying about the refs. What a freaking loser. I'm glad he lost. Mike from PA says Sirianni didn't do anything. Howie Roseman picked both coordinators. The GM handpicked the babysitters for the head coach. I mean, that probably tracks. I mean, again, like I told you, Robert Turbin played for both guys. Nick Sirianni was the offensive coordinator under Frank Reich in Indianapolis, and Brian Schottenheimer was the offensive coordinator in Seattle under Pete Carroll. And Robert Turbin played for both of them. And I'd like to say I know Turbo pretty well, and he shoots it straight. And Turbo said to me, I asked him after Schottenheimer got hired, I said, you've played for both guys. If you had to pick one or the other, and you had to say, hey, who would you rather, who would you think would be the better head coach? He said unequivocally, Brian Schottenheimer. So when you tell me that Howie Roseman, one of the smartest guys in the NFL, handpicked the two coordinators that freaking dominated all season long, I wouldn't doubt it. I think Sirianni's kind of a boob. But hey, that's the good news. You don't have to have the coach. Andy Reid, Bill Belichick. You don't have to have the coach in order to win the Super Bowl. One texter says a first-time coach, especially one that didn't call plays in his prior job, should not call plays as a new head coach. He has too much to worry about already. That's not my problem. Because if you do that, you don't get Kevin O'Connell. Kevin O'Connell calls the plays. Kevin O'Connell did not call the plays as the quarterback's coach of the Rams before he went to Minnesota. So I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem with is look at Kevin O'Connell's defensive coordinator. Hey, Brian Flores, here you go. By the way, Brian Flores' first year on the job was last year because O'Connell realized after his first season, I need to go get a veteran defensive coordinator who I can just give the defense to and say, it's yours and I can focus on offense, which is what should have happened here. One texter said, I thought the Titans DC was the next up-and-coming guy. Let me tell you this. I brought this up when they hired Denard Wilson. And I said, first-year Titan DCs have been awful. Whether it was Jim Schwartz, who is a good coordinator and everybody knows it. Whether it was Jim Schwartz's first year, which was a train wreck, Shane Bowen's 2020 season when he was the coordinator, Vrabel said, but he really wasn't the coordinator because Vrabel was trying to be like Belichick and leave ambiguity with the titles because that's what those guys do. Chuck Cecil in 2009, terrible, terrible, terrible. Ray Horton, terrible. When they've had the experienced guys, Dick LeBeau and Dean Pease, and those defenses have been okay. But when they go get these guys, but he's an up-and-coming star, Jared. Yeah, the Ravens chose not to hire Denard Wilson to be their DC. They went with an up-and-coming star in Zach Orr. And guess what? Midway through the year, John Harbaugh called Dean Pease up and said, Dean, I need you. Because that first year, coordinator was struggling. I mean, again, it's not an accident that the Eagles went out and got a guy who's been coaching defense for 150 years and gave him the defense and said, it's yours. The Rams, when they were good with McVay, when they had Wade Phillips, it's yours. That's what Callahan should do. I don't care about calling the plays. What I think is, Callahan, you take the offense. Give the defense to Lou Anarumo, to Dennis Allen, to Jim Schwartz, to Steve Wilkes, whomever. Give them the defense. Robert Saleh, give them the defense. The same way you should just give Bones Fossil the special teams. But for some reason, they won't do it. And I don't know what I could not tell you for the life of me what they wanted. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. One guy is just getting murdered for last night. I thought he did an okay job. We'll get to that next. Stillman & Company. It's 102.5 The Game.
and 16. Mahomes rolling out. Looking, firing, intercepted. Picked up by Cooper DeJean. Gets a block. DeJean is in. Touchdown.
Patrick, one of the best in the world. They're just trying to get him out of the pocket to buy a little time. And he sees the crossing route coming to the left, but he loses track of DeJean as he kind of falls back and reads Patrick's eyes. You can see the break. And this young stud, Cooper DeJean, another rookie making a huge impact on this Eagles defense. Since they've inserted him in the lineup, they have been absolutely unstoppable on defense.
There you go. That was the Cooper DeJean pick six, where again it went from, hey, it's 10-0 and Mahomes has the ball. And at that point, Kansas City's one play out of the game. Mahomes hits Worthy and they pick it. I mean, again, we've seen Kansas City erase 10-point deficits in big games like that. So they're certainly now DeJean with a pick six, 17-0. Okay, now you're in trouble. So again, played the play-by-play call there. I thought Burkhardt had a good call. Brady says, oh, he reads the eyes, and it's a pick six and a great play, and blah, blah, blah. I thought Tom Brady was fine last night. And online, the amount of whining and complaining about Tom Brady, I thought was absurd. And I think the amount of whining and complaining that we have had this season when it comes to Tom Brady calling games has been so incredibly overblown. I mean, I'm reading articles about how Brady's not adding enough insight into the broadcast. See, here's the problem, though. We're expecting Tom Brady, the broadcaster, in year one to be Tom Brady, the quarterback, the best right away. We're expecting Tom Brady as a broadcaster to be John Madden. Well, he's getting paid the most, and he's getting paid the most because Fox wants the star power to sell to their advertisers, to stick on Colin Cowherd, to put on their pregame show, not just call the games. And Brady's star power matters because if this were Phil Simms who had called the game last night, we wouldn't be having this discussion and there wouldn't be these kind of articles. And I thought Phil Simms was fine calling the games for 20 years as the number one guy at CBS. And for however many years that Phil Simms was there with the late, who was it? Was he calling games at NBC with Dick Enberg and, the punter who was good? Was it Al McGuire? Paul McGuire and Phil Simms probably did it together at NBC for like 5 years, and then he went to CBS and was on the number one at CBS. And Phil was fine. But again, Phil Simms as a broadcaster was probably similar to Phil Simms as a quarterback. It's fine. This wasn't Tom Brady. You know, Tom Brady's the greatest that ever lived. Again, last night, I thought Brady did a fine job calling the game. I think he's easier to listen to than Tony Romo. I think he's got more juice because he's Tom Brady than Greg Olsen. I mean, Greg Olsen, I hate to say it, he's a nobody. So the idea that a lot of people are putting out there that it was just a travesty to the fans and to the NFL and everything else that Tom Brady was calling the game last night, I think it's completely unfair. And here's the second thing when it comes to Brady. Because I am a Brady fan. I freaking love when Tom Brady talks about his own career. In fact, there was a cut from him going on Cowherd's show last week at the Super Bowl where he talked about how for 2 weeks leading up to the Chiefs Super Bowl, he did nothing but watch Chiefs film. In fact, the Friday night before the game, Brady was watching the film so that when he got out there on the field, he could see the body language of the players and the safeties and the linebackers, and he knew when they were blitzing, and he knew when it was cover two, and he knew what was coming, and so on and so forth. And Brady had great insight talking about, you know, when I lost the Super Bowl, how nobody ever says anything to me about the AFC title games I lost to Peyton Manning, but everybody brings up the helmet catch, and everybody brings up the Philly special, and again, incredibly insightful stuff from Brady. I agree. with some of the criticism when it comes to Brady that I wish last night, as Mahomes was in that 17-0 hole, as Mahomes was in that 24-0 hole, that Brady could have talked about his experience against the Falcons. And he could have said, when we were down by 24 points or 25 points to the Falcons, here's what I thought. Here's my mindset. Here's mine. But here's the problem. That if Brady does that, then the articles that right now are coming out saying, Tom Brady didn't give enough insight being in that situation with Mahomes, would then come out and say, Tom Brady spent too much time talking about himself. I can already see it. Again, Brady was fine. I think he's a better listen than Romo. Romo says some crazy crap on the air. Romo and Nance, like, I think at first when Romo was calling out the plays, and I don't know why Romo doesn't do that anymore, but I think at first, like, it was fun and Jim Nance was into it. Now I feel like Jim Nance just kind of tolerates Tony Romo. Like, well, I guess I'm going to have to pick up the slack once again, Tony. Our crew here on CBS. Brady is much easier to listen to than Romo. And again, Tom Brady has more juice than Greg Olsen. Greg Olsen's a nobody. They see all these people that feel bad for Greg Olsen. Go to Amazon and call some games. I don't give a rat's ass. But, okay. So, but again, if you're expecting Brady to be Herbstreit right away, that's not how really anything works. And again, I think Brady was good. I think he's fine this year. And I think he'll get better next year. And I will say this, I bet it was hard for Brady last night to not sit back there. After, he hears people talking about comparing him to Mahomes and comparing the Chiefs dynasty to the Patriots dynasty. And Brady's like, I won 7 freaking Super Bowls. If this guy wins his 4th, he still has 3 more Super Bowls to go to get to me. Brady's sitting there thinking to himself, like, come on now. I beat this guy twice in the playoffs. What are we doing? And so when Mahomes is just looking pedestrian out there, I bet it was so hard for Brady not to sit there and say, ah! But I'm sure there was some of that. Somebody in the YouTube chat said Romo was Herbstreit right away. Romo sucks now. Like, again, Brady doesn't suck. Brady could be better. Romo sucks. Like, I can't do the, Jim Nance is just so eloquent when the way he calls the game. 3rd down and 6. Allen, he's got time. He throws over the middle. It's completed. Shakir, and it's a gain of 41, and they're down to the 19-yard line for the Buffalo Bills. Oh, Jim, could you believe that? Oh, my God. Like, that's all he does. Romo, they'll show a replay, and Romo will be sitting there saying, I think it was a good call. Gene Steratore, New York, Gene. And Gene will be like, I disagree, Tony. Every time. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Dan Orlovsky apologized to Jalen Hurts after winning the Super Bowl. Jalen Hurts is at Disney World right now. Jalen Hurts is an average to above average quarterback. And last night's result doesn't change it. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. We are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. Congratulations to the Philadelphia Eagles, their crazy fans. Congratulations again on what was truly a heinous Super Bowl, but they were by far the best team in the league this year. You know, they dominated Kansas City. They beat Baltimore. They dominated Washington. Detroit didn't have the defense to be able to compete with Philadelphia if they would have gone against each other. And I'm not sure that there are enough players on the Bills that would have given Josh Allen a chance to beat Philly, though I think that would have been a better matchup in the Super Bowl because Josh Allen actually had an offensive line, which Mahomes didn't. But last night after the game was over, and again, I picked Philadelphia on Friday, 6-pack picks. I picked Philly to win the game 31-17. And there was just a feeling I had that it could be Legion of Boom versus Peyton Manning all over again, that it could be kind of one of those blowout-ish Super Bowls. I had that feeling. And I don't know if it was defensive line versus offensive line. I don't know if it was that I was staying in the Chiefs hotel, and everybody that was associated with the Chiefs, they were kind of just treating it like, yeah, you know, we're here. This is what we normally do, is we normally end up here at the Super Bowl. So I was sitting there last night watching the game, thinking that that was what was going to happen. Not the blowout to that extent, but again, I thought it was going to be 31-17. I thought it was going to be close-ish in the first half, and then Philly would pull away in the second half. And I'll be darned if Philly's defense and the defensive line didn't do exactly what I thought they would do, and then some. And so after the game was over, which the game was over by halftime, but after the game was over, I was sitting there with my cousin, and he said, "Who's the MVP?" And I was like, "It's got to be Josh Sweat, right? Or Cooper DeJean, or one of these defensive guys for the Eagles." So I searched my phone and put an MVP. First thing that came up on Twitter, Adam Schefter. Jalen Hurts named MVP of the Super Bowl. And I thought, you have got to be kidding me. Jalen Hurts is a good quarterback. He's not a great quarterback. And Jalen Hurts is the perfect game manager quarterback. That's what he did in college, and that's why when Nick Saban needed somebody with a little more, he made the change. And that's what Jalen Hurts is in the NFL. Jalen Hurts doesn't turn it over, which is, again, now he had the bad interception early in the game, but traditionally, Hurts doesn't turn it over, which is the number one thing a game-managing quarterback must do. Ryan Tannehill was a good game manager. He throws 3 interceptions against the Bengals. Now he's not so much of a game manager. He can make enough of the throws. He can't make all the throws, and he can't make the throws under duress, and he's got to be throwing to the best receivers, but he can make throws, and he can make some plays with his feet. But there's a big difference between a game-managing quarterback, which is what Jalen Hurts is, and an MVP quarterback, which is now what people are going to talk about Jalen Hurts as if he is one of those because he was the game MVP. And those are two totally different things. And I'm worried now that because Jalen Hurts won a Super Bowl and was the game's MVP, that we are going to conflate the two. I'll never forget when Joe Flacco went on his run. And look, no disrespect to Jalen, but Joe Flacco went through Peyton Manning and Tom Brady en route to the Super Bowl. And the Ravens won. And he was the game's MVP. And he got this huge contract. And then there was all this talk of, is Joe Flacco elite? And the answer is, Joe Flacco was never elite. Floyd told me one time that he didn't like Joe Flacco when he was coming up out of Delaware. And then Joe Flacco won a Super Bowl. And the old man said to me, he goes, you know, at that point, I'm starting to question myself. I'm like, did I get this wrong? He goes, and then you watch over the next couple of years, you're like, nope, got it right. Flacco is who he is. Jalen is who he is. When they don't have the right coordinators in there and A.J. Brown's hurt, Jalen can't do anything. Like he couldn't do anything in that Tampa Bay playoff game last year. But when Jalen's got the best offensive line with 2 all-pro tackles and the best running back, and his defense turns over the best quarterback in the game multiple times, including a pick 6, Jalen can manage it properly and get you the tush push and get the wide open throws to AJ and Devontae, and he can do all of that. And that's what he did last night. But again, let's stop pretending that Jalen Hurts is something that he's not. He is not Josh Allen. Josh Allen does not manage the game for the Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen has to go out there and win the game. Jalen didn't go out there and win the game yesterday. The Eagle defense gave him 14 points in the first half. 7 on the pick 6 from Cooper DeJean, and another 7 right there before the half on the interception from Zach Bond. That was all defense. That wasn't the quarterback. But this is what we do in the NFL, which is when a team wins the Super Bowl, we just assume it's because of their quarterback. Do you know where Philadelphia averaged the start of their drives in the game? They averaged starting the ball at their own 43-yard line. I mean, you're already at midfield when you get the ball. With the 2 best receivers, with the best offensive line, with the best running back in the game, who set a record for most rushing yards in a season, including the playoffs, ever, with Saquon Barkley last night. And yet I'm now supposed to believe that Jalen Hurts is an elite quarterback, that Jalen Hurts belongs in the discussion with Josh Allen and Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes. And again, Cincinnati doesn't have a team if Joe Burrow's not their quarterback. I think there's probably 12 to 15 quarterbacks who could have quarterbacked Philadelphia yesterday and won that game. And that's why I was so appalled last night when I saw Jalen Hurts MVP. And it's no knock on Jalen Hurts. But again, MVP my ass. He was not the reason that they won the game, which is the point of the MVP award. The most valuable player. Again, valuable. If Josh Sweat doesn't get 2.5 sacks and doesn't push Joe Thuney into Mahomes when Mahomes throws the interception before halftime, does Philadelphia win the game as easily as they did last night? If Cooper DeJean doesn't intercept the ball, then run all the way down the sideline into the end zone with a pick 6, does Philly win the game that easily? It was 10-0 Philly at that point. 10-0 is one play, and Mahomes is right back in it. Now 17-0 is a little different. Again, Jalen led them on one drive down the field for a touchdown the first half. The rest came from the defense. The defense won them that game. But now, again, when we talk about this, we'll remember this as Jalen Hurts, MVP. And I'm sorry, but I'm just not there to give credit to someone when they didn't do the job. I'm just not there to say, okay, let's pretend Jalen Hurts is not something that he isn't, or is something that he isn't. Let's pretend he is something he isn't, just because he's got an incredible defense and great coordinators and everything else. So he's a good game managing quarterback. And last night, he did a fabulous job of managing the game. But that's not MVP. The MVP is not a game manager. The MVP is the guy that wins you the game. It was not Jalen Hurts last night. And for some reason, the amount of people, he threw for 220 yards. Like Nick Foles, when they won, he was MVP. He threw for like 450. Give me a break. Jalen Hurts, game MVP. 615-737-1025. So I don't care that A.J. Brown won the Super Bowl, but I bet a lot of you do. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
AJ, coming over from Tennessee and then to Philadelphia, I was ecstatic when you got here, man. It's been a big transformation in your career, but you got to be satisfied with just the outcome of everything, regardless of how it looked.
Yeah. It's truly a blessing. You know, I appreciate my time in Tennessee, but Howie came and got me, and Howie does a great job each and every year preparing us and getting a great team together. Yeah. And I'm glad he did. And, you know, and his team went through tough times, came up short one time, got here. The next year we crumbled a little bit, but it's all worth it.
Jay Brown last night after the game. You know, hey, I thank God Howie Roseman came in here and got me. So I saw some Titan fans on there that were just bemoaning A.J. Brown winning a Super Bowl. The new thing is A.J. Brown Super Bowl rings. 1, Treylon Burks receiving touchdowns. 1. And every time someone puts something out, that Titan fans are like, oh no, oh God, oh why? Let me say this. I'm not here to cover for John Robinson. I'm not here to say that, no, you look back on it, it was a move they should have made. It was a terrible decision. Again, it was the kind of move that gets people fired. But that decision was made 3 years ago. Like, at some point, don't you have to move on? Everybody associated with the team, outside of the owner, when that decision was made, has been fired. How many players, off the top of my head, how many players are there that played with A.J. Brown on the Titans? 4? Again, like off the top of my head, Simmons, Hooker, Dylan Radins, and boy, I'm sure Dylan Radins and A.J. Brown really spent a lot of time together. And I think Morgan Cox, the long snapper, was there that year. Other than that, who was on the team with A.J. Brown? Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry, Taylor Lewan, Roger Saffold, Ben Jones, Nate Davis. I'm trying to think. I don't even remember who the tight end was. Was it Ferkser then?
I believe so.
Yeah, so again, 4 guys. Byard's not on the team anymore. David Long's not on the team anymore. I mean, you're not going to make every correct decision over the years with your team. But what we need to realize is that it is how these teams rectify those decisions that really matter. More so than just, oh my God, can you believe we made a bad decision? You do realize the Eagles made bad decisions too, right? Like, they traded for A.J. Brown because they were rectifying the decision of blowing the 2020 draft pick on Jalen Reagor 1 slot ahead of Justin Jefferson. The Titans signed Calvin Ridley because they blew it with A.J. Brown. But the Titans can overcome a horrendous trade that has already gotten people fired, just like the Eagles can overcome drafting Andre Dillard in the first round. Just because the Titans have hired bad people doesn't mean that, oh my God, trading A.J. Brown was the worst thing. And I keep wondering something too. If they hadn't traded A.J. Brown, if, let's say, Tory Dandy had not driven a wedge, that's the agent A.J. Brown had, who is a very good agent. If Tory Dandy had not driven the wedge between John Robinson, A.J. Brown, and the Titans had signed A.J. to an extension, would you still want Robinson to be the GM? A lot of you guys are convinced he sucks no matter what. So then wasn't that a good thing that happened so that you guys could get him out and get the good general managers in? Like the one you just had. Enough. A.J. Brown's been gone for 3 years. At some point, it's time to let it go. That would be like passing on a guy in the draft and just bemoaning it every single day. At some point, just move on. So I don't care that A.J. Brown won a Super Bowl. And considering how much pouting during the game DeAndre Hopkins did to get his trade out there to go to try to win a ring, and then the pouting he did after the game last night, I'm much happier A.J. Brown won a title, which I don't care about, than I am DeAndre Hopkins, who I think is a loser. Let's go to Scott. Phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com at 615-737-1025. Scott, thank you for calling. Go ahead.
Hey, Jared. Hey, I just joined the radio station just before the break, and you were talking about Jalen, the MVP, I guess not really deserving it. Who would you think should have deserved the MVP?
I would have given it to Josh Sweat, who had 2.5 sacks and pushed the tackle Thuney into Mahomes on the interception before halftime when he threw the ball right to Zach Bond, which led to the touchdown that made it 24-0.
And I would have to agree with you on that. Don't always agree with you a lot, but I would agree with you on that. You made a comment about the Eagles, have problems and whatever, but I think the difference between the Eagles and the Titans is the Eagles have been to the Super Bowl twice in the last couple of years, and they actually won. Titans haven't been able to fix their problems yet, and it may take time. It may take time.
Well, so here's the difference between the Eagles and the Titans, and I'm glad you bring this up. Scott, thank you for your call. Here's the difference between the Eagles and the Titans. The Eagles have an owner that knows ball. Kalen Kaler wrote an article at ESPN that came out about, I don't know, a month and a half ago. And in it, she talked to a former NFL head coach, and I have a pretty good idea who this former NFL head coach is. She talked to a former NFL coach who had interviewed for 10 jobs and said the only one that had a clue when the owner interviewed the coach was Jeffrey Lurie with the Eagles. If you go back to that 2018 championship team, or I guess 27 technically, Carson Wentz was the quarterback. Then Nick Foles came in there. They ran the Philly special. Doug Peterson was the coach. Frank Reich was the OC. Jim Schwartz was the DC. That team, I believe, had Lane Johnson and Brandon Graham on it, and that's it. Everybody else is new. What the Eagles were able to do, the Eagles are not, and again, Howie Roseman's a great general manager, but Howie Roseman's not perfect either. We already brought up Andre Dillard and Jalen Reagor, 2 first-round draft choices. They blew it in 2019. They blew it in 2020. Why not fire everybody? But the owner knew that Howie Roseman was a good general manager. Just like I thought the owner here knew that John Robinson was a good general manager who won 61% of his games and gave him a contract extension in spite of the fact that they had made some moves that hadn't worked out. But they allowed Howie to rectify the situation. Howie got to hire another coach. Howie got to trade Carson Wentz. Howie got to use those draft picks. And because Howie knows ball, it ended up working out. The truth is, something that the Titans talked about internally before they traded A.J. Brown was, at some point with Tannehill and Henry and those ages, Byard and Lawan, and at some point we may have to tear this down and build it back up. And I have a pretty good feeling that those discussions were being had. But what the Eagles did was they let Howie Roseman tear it down and build it back up. You know what's hilarious about this Jalen Hurts discussion? It is well documented that even after they made the playoffs in 2021, the year after they traded away Carson Wentz, and the year that they had Jalen Hurts as their starter, and Nick Sirianni the first year as the coach, they tried for Russell Wilson. And the reason they didn't get Russell Wilson isn't because they didn't have a good enough trade offer. It's because Russell turned them down. Russell had a no-trade clause. So I think that's the big difference. The Eagles won the Super Bowl, tore the whole thing down, built it back up, and they let Howie Roseman do that in a media market that is probably one of the most vicious and volatile in the country. But the owner knows what he's doing. Here, the owner got mad that the fans in Philly turned around and flipped her off in the box, and she on a Tuesday in first place hauled off and fired the general manager. That doesn't happen in Philly. Last year, everybody was demanding Nick Sirianni be fired. They didn't do it. And today they're champions. So the biggest difference with the Titans and the Eagles is ownership. Ownership knows how to run a football team in Philadelphia. Here, well, she just hired Chad Brinker to do it because she doesn't think she can. Philadelphia pays, which is why they have 2 tackles that are on big deals. Philadelphia pays, which is why they have A.J. Brown. Philadelphia pays, which is how they got Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio to be their coordinators. Doesn't feel necessarily like you do. That's the difference. Bradley is up next on the program. Bradley, thank you for calling and waiting. Go ahead.
Hey, Jared, just to kind of in the mindset of building like a Philadelphia, what's the point of a bridge quarterback? I cannot figure out why we want to spend half of our cap on anyone to be mediocre. And if we're building a team, if we want to trade back and we want to, and maybe you can spend some time on this on another day. You don't have to answer it today, maybe, but I'm just saying, I don't get the bridge quarterback. I don't get spending 20, 30 million on a quarterback to get 7 or 8 wins.
Well, a bridge quarterback is not a $20 or $30 million proposition. Like Jacoby Brissett is a bridge quarterback. That's an $8 million signing. Who are you talking about that's $20 or $30 million as a bridge quarterback?
I'm hearing the Aaron Rodgers thing, just hearing Aaron Rodgers coming, and that would be like, to me, it'd be a nightmare because I think at worst, you're going to get 3-4 wins. You could get 7-8 wins. And I wouldn't mind if they maybe traded back with New England and try to get Milton in. That might be something to do. But
you want Joe Milton to play quarterback for the Titans?
Look, if you swap picks and get something for it, maybe. As
so hold on. So you would trade. So hold on. Bradley, I want to make sure I hear this clearly.
Yeah.
So you want to trade from number 1 to number 4 and get Joe Milton in return?
And something else. But picks, yeah. If possible.
What is something else?
Out there. Well, maybe a third to replace the third that we don't have. I would say that maybe that might be something. I'm just saying, there's a big draft class next year where, Carson Beck would be 4th in this year's draft and Carson Beck is 10th in next year's draft. And
so I'm going to stop you there. Nick, if you could, and I appreciate your call, Bradley. Nick, if you could, can we cut that where, again, he makes the argument that he wants the Titans to trade from 1 to 4 for Joe Milton and a third? And can we play that, because Robbie's out all week, can you play that for Kaharski tomorrow?
I sure can.
I would love to. I have heard some stupid stuff on the radio in my day, and that one is, woo! That is wild. One texter says, you talk about Sam Darnold as a bridge, and he is a $30 to $40 million quarterback. I don't talk about Sam Darnold as a bridge quarterback. A bridge quarterback is Daniel Jones, 1 year, $10 million. I want to spend $30 to $40 million on Sam Darnold to be the quarterback of the Titans. And again, I think Sam Darnold's in the same class as Jalen Hurts. And then I get my first pick and I get to go get Abdul Carter, or I go get to trade back and build up my offensive line. And again, Jalen Hurts wins because he's got the best players around him, not because he's the best. Goodness gracious. Joe Milton. Do you people even watch football when you call in with like a take like that? I did the math yesterday. In order for the Titans to move to number 6, I didn't do the math with New England because they have a quarterback, but I did the math with the trade downs that it would take. In order for the Titans to trade back to 6 with Vegas and for it to equal up on the chart, Vegas would have to give you the 6th pick, the 37th pick in the second round, the 68th pick in the third round, their first rounder, and 73 in the third round. And you'd send back 102 and 145, which are 4th and 5th round picks. That's to get to 6. This guy wants to go to 4 for a third in Joe Milton. Woof. 615-737-1025 here on the program. 615-737-1025. And we'll hit your phones next. Stillman and Company, 1025, 106 through the game.
Guys, also, I'm going to shift gears here. I do have some breaking news right now to report on the show. That's what we do. And it involves another Super Bowl MVP, and that is Aaron Rodgers. And guys, I've learned that Aaron Rodgers flew back to New Jersey this week to meet with the Jets about his future. Met with the team head coach and the GM, only to be told that they want to move on from him. Now, the thing is, what does Aaron want as player or not? What happens? Did they trade him? Do they cut him? Whatever it is, but the fact that Aaron actually used his own plane to fly there to find out what the decision probably means that Aaron still wants to play another year, just not going to be for the Jets. How about that?
Well, how about flying back and having your girlfriend say we break it up? But I would tell you this, it's better to do it now. But it's better to do it now than to do it later, because now Aaron Rodgers has the chance to go out and find another team, and the Jets have a chance to let everybody know we're going in a different direction.
Who saw that yesterday on the Fox pregame show where Jay Glazer's out there on Bourbon Street, and he's like, hey, breaking news, Aaron out in New York. And I got to say, I'm a little surprised because at the Super Bowl, there were a lot of people there that were thinking, hey, Rodgers and the Jets, there may be something, because there's just not, there's just not anything that there's no real option for the Jets as far as their quarterback situation is concerned. So LD from McMinnville texts in and says, Jared, you've got the numbers or the chart in front of you. Can you tell me what it would take for the Jets and the Titans to swat spots in the drafts based on the Jets needing a quarterback? Well, if you're watching the stream right now, I have in front of me. Let's see if it gets it right there. What the trade chart says it would take, and then what I would want if there was a player I loved, if there was a quarterback I loved, or if there was a player I didn't love with that first pick and I wanted to trade out. And so, for instance, he asked for the Jets. Here's what the trade chart says the Titans would need to get from the Jets in order to make a fair trade. Frazier, are you following? This is going to be quite complicated.
Listening.
The New York Jets would have to trade to the Tennessee Titans 7 in the first round, 42 in the second round, 92 in the third round, their 2026 first, their 2026 second, and a 2027 first in order to move up to number 1, and the Titans would have to send back 119 and 180. 119 is in the fourth round, and 180 is in the sixth round. So you would need their first, second, third, next year's first, next year's second, and the following year's first in order for them to swap spots if they desperately wanted a quarterback. That sounds like a lot. Now, the one thing they do have is I believe they have 4 players. So I looked at the teams, Cleveland, the Giants, the Raiders, and the Jets, because all 4 will need quarterbacks and they might want to pick them. And so I designated each team's what I call first round pick players. So for instance, if the Giants were to call up and we were trying to make a deal, and for the Giants, in order for it to be a fair trade according to the chart, it would be their first, second, and third, and they'd get your 5th at 169 back. That's what that would be. If instead they don't want to give up next year's first, or they don't want to give up whatever, then throw in Malik Neighbors, and that counts as a first rounder. So the Jets are the only team that has what I consider to be 4 first-round pick players. Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson, Quentin Williams, and Olu Fashanu. For instance, the Raiders have 2, Brock Bowers, Max Crosby. The Giants have 2, Malik Neighbors and Andrew Thomas. And the Browns have 1, Myles Garrett. Now, Myles Garrett, that is complicated. But, again, that's what the chart says. That does not mean that that is what the Jets would be willing to offer, and that does not mean that that is what the Titans would be willing to take. And, again, I don't know if there are players that they love or that they don't love. One texter says that guy had to be trolling you, talking about the caller that said that he wanted to trade back to 4 and acquire Joe Milton. You know, Joe Milton is so fascinating because I listen to Boston radio, as you all know, and there's a lot of talk about like, hey, Joe Milton, like, could he be better than Drake May? Because he, and of course, all of us here that watched Joe Milton for 3 years in college know the answer is no. But sometimes they don't. When somebody calls in and says trade for Joe Milton to be the quarterback of the Titans, I'm like, do you just want to suck again? Because that's what a lot of this is. let me say this about last night's Super Bowl. Last night's Super Bowl was a good night to be Abdul Carter. Because, and I saw, by the way, that Abdul Carter was watching the game, and Abdul Carter did send out a tweet about, hey, defense wins. And I hope Abdul Carter enjoyed watching that Super Bowl because it reminded me of the last time the Titans held the number 1 pick in the draft. Now, they ended up trading that. They drafted Conklin and Henry and Jonnu Smith and everything else. But when the Titans held that first pick in 2016, and if you'll remember, the quarterback class, Jared Goff, Carson Wentz, certainly not the hype of a Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels kind of class. So that didn't seem to be a need. Plus, they had already drafted Mariota the year before. And I said at that point in time, if I was on the clock with the number 1 pick in the 2016 draft, I would have drafted Joey Bosa with the first overall pick. Now, the Titans at the time didn't have a right tackle, and Taylor Lewan was an iffy left tackle. But I would have taken Joey Bosa. And the reason I would have taken Joey Bosa with that first pick is because at that point in time, the defending Super Bowl champions or the reigning Super Bowl champions were the Denver Broncos. And the Denver Broncos won their Super Bowl because in both the AFC Championship game against New England and the Super Bowl against MVP Cam Newton and 15-1 Carolina, Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware absolutely wrecked shop. It's hard after watching the Super Bowl yesterday not to think, hey, Abdul Carter, Jeffrey Simmons, Tavondre Sweat as that run-stuffing DT. You can stay with Landry. You can reduce his salary a little bit. You can move on from Landry. But, go out and sign somebody on the free agent market. And it's not hard to think that, hey, with the right coaching, which I'm not sure you have, with the right coaching, you could have a pretty intimidating defensive front. And this is a copycat league. Again, it's easy to look at a pass rush like that and say, yeah, go get Abdul Carter. Unfortunately, it's not as simple as that, but it does remind me a lot of when Joey Bosa was doing his thing, dominating at Ohio State. You had the number 1 pick, and Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware just basically carried Denver, who was, Peyton, God bless him, he couldn't even feel the football in his fingertips anymore, and carried Denver to a Super Bowl. That did cross my mind last night. And if Travis Hunter's not going to be a good wide receiver, then I'm really not interested in Travis Hunter with number 1 pick. But Jared, he can't, he's got to be a star receiver if I take him with that first pick. 615-737-1025 is the phone number, 615-737-1025. So Jalen Hurts is Super Bowl MVP. Good for him. But let me just say this. Last night's game does not change what I think of Jalen Hurts. But it will do this for many of you. We'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5 The Game.
Jalen, you told us this week, as Brandon Graham's trying to give you a big hug here.
Yeah! Boy, I appreciate you. I appreciate you too. Appreciate you. Let them know. Let them boys know, man. Tell them get off your back. Let's go.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to ask. You said after Super Bowl 57, you sat in the locker room and you thought to yourself, I'll be back. You got back, and now you're a champion. How does that feel?
You know, God is good. He's greater than all the highs and the lows. And I think, personally myself, I've just been able to use every experience and learn from it. The good, the bad, all of it, using it as fuel to pursue my own greatness. And I think I couldn't do any of these things without the guys around me. You know, we got a special group this year. We were able to learn from the past.
That was Jalen Hurts after the game yesterday. And again, MVP Jalen Hurts. Unbelievable. One texter into the text line says, Howie Roseman deserves the Super Bowl MVP. I do think we need to start putting coordinators and play callers into the MVP discussion, because I'd give it to Vic Fangio before I would have given it to Jalen Hurts. Here's how I would have done it if I were, again, the king of the Super Bowl. Number 1 would have been Josh Sweat. Number 2 would have been Cooper DeJean. Number 3 would have been Jalen Carter. Number 4 would have been Zach Bond. Number 5 would have been Jalen Hurts as far as the MVP was concerned. And even then, I really wouldn't have felt comfortable giving the award to Hurts. Now, but again, I can't dictate what everybody else decides to do. So now that Jalen Hurts has won a Super Bowl and a Super Bowl MVP, here's what I think is going to happen. First of all, now there's going to be a Hall of Fame discussion around Jalen Hurts. I don't think he's there yet, and I'm not sure he'd ever make it. But if you win 3 Super Bowls, even if you're just game managing them, hey, Troy Aikman did that. And so good for him. I am not, based off of yesterday, moving Jalen Hurts significantly up or down the quarterback list. I have Mahomes 1, Allen 2, Burrow 3. Now, if you know me, you know I actually like Burrow the best, but again, the results have to mean something. Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels 5, Justin Herbert 6, CJ Stroud 7. That is my elite category. Now, there is some projection there with Daniels and Stroud. You know, would like to see him do a little bit more, a little bit longer, but that's the top 7. I don't think any of those teams trade their quarterbacks for anybody. Matthew Stafford, I think, is in a category all by himself at number 8, in which I think if he was a little bit younger, he might be in the elite category. He has won a Super Bowl. He had a great season this year. He still got it. I would put Stafford at 8, but you would trade Stafford for every single one of those guys ahead of him. Dak Prescott is 9, Jared Goff is 10, Jordan Love is 11, Jalen Hurts is 12. And these are guys that if you put the perfect team around them with the right coaches, with the right offensive line, defense, everything, you can win 1 Super Bowl. And I include in this group Baker Mayfield, who's behind Jalen Hurts at 12, Baker at 13, Purdy at 14, Darnold at 15, Lawrence at 16. Then after that's kind of another category, which is Bo Nix, Kyler Murray, and Tua. And then everybody else after that sucks. And that's, again, 12. Middle of the road quarterback. If you want to call it a top 3rd quarterback, you can. But that's how I view Jalen Hurts. But again, what's going to happen is now because he's won a Super Bowl, I saw this with Joe Flacco. There's going to be this whole entire is Jalen Hurts elite? And the answer is no. I saw Dan Orlovsky came out and apologized for calling Jalen Hurts a liability. Jalen Hurts is a liability. But when you have a 17-point lead or a 24-point lead, thanks in large part to 14 points from your defense, and the other team can't stop your pass rush, you don't have to worry about asking Jalen to do anything that would be a liability or not. Jalen never once had to come from behind in these playoffs. That's why I don't think he'll win the Super Bowl. And that's why I've got him again, right there with Jared Goff, Jordan Love, Baker Mayfield, and Brock Purdy. Because I think a lot of quarterbacks can win the Super Bowl with that team that the Eagles had this year. And they won't be the same next year, but they're there right now. That's going to do it for us. What a wonderful football season it was. Boy, I tell you, this is the time of the year where I start to, I don't know about you guys, I start to get a little depressed thinking about the reality that the football season is behind us. But the offseason, which has started for the Titans a long, long time ago, officially starts for everybody today. And we'll be all over it tomorrow. Stillman and Company. We'll see you tomorrow, too.